Chapter 480. After Li Daochong killed all 3 dead spirit pythons, he didn't fall down. Instead, he sped up and flew in front of Pang Yi and the other 2 Grand Wizard. Just the 3 of you? Li Daochong asked. Pang Yi's greenish-gray face was uncertain. He couldn't see through the human cultivator in front of him. He killed hundreds of 3-headed dead spirit pythons with 1 strike. With this strength, he was at least Yuanying's peak Grand Wizard level. But the aura on his body was clearly that of a Jin Dan. How could a Jin Dan cultivator have such terrifying strength? This was too abnormal. A soul formation cultivator? A fake aura? Pang Yi was a bit uncertain. The other 2 Grand Wizard looked at each other. They both received Pang Yi's death intent message. Kill. The 2 Grand Wizard immediately attacked. Whoosh. A green light flashed. The 2 Grand Wizard were just about to attack when they were split in half. The Grand Wizard core shattered in their bodies. Beep. Killed 2 Grand Wizard ghosts. Soul power gained. Converted to spirit energy. A notification sounded in Li Daochong's mind. His body instantly gained a majestic spirit energy. The Sun Jin Dan grew a bit bigger. There were faint signs of a breakthrough. The baby figure in the Jin Dan had completely materialized. Yuanying's silhouette could be seen clearly. With just 1 breakthrough, the Yuanying inside would break out of the core. Pang Yi's eyes widened. Fear spread throughout his body. His hands trembled slightly. Was he really a soul formation cultivator? Didn't they say that there were no soul formation cultivators on 13 Specter? Pang Yi turned around and ran. With a whoosh, he shot towards the horizon. But just as he flew, the human cultivator appeared in front of him. What kind of speed was this? Pang Yi was so shocked that he almost screamed. You're so powerful. Don't you want to fight me? Li Daochong asked curiously. On his way here, Li Daochong sensed a huge amount of death qi above the northwest stronghold. The death qi was thick and dense, as deep as the sea. It was much stronger than any death qi he had encountered before. Even Urumai and Sanger could not compare. Li Daochong had never seen a Grand Wizard before, so he was really looking forward to it. However, after seeing him, Li Daochong seemed rather disappointed. A high and mighty Grand Wizard was actually so timid, running away as soon as he saw him. What was the meaning of this? Was he really that powerful? Li Daochong didn't quite understand. The calmer Li Daochong appeared, the more shocked Pang Yi was. The more he felt that the young man in front of him was a divine transformation realm cultivator. Otherwise, why would he be so scared? This kind of fear was completely spontaneous, like the feeling of a mouse seeing a cat. Pang Yi only had this feeling when facing Wu Ho, ancestor sorcerer. He had never felt this way when facing a human cultivator. Of course, he had never met a divine transformation realm cultivator before. At this moment, the only explanation was that the cultivator in front of him was in the divine transformation realm. In fact, any dark ghost would be afraid when they saw Li Daochong. This was because Li Daochong was the natural enemy of all dark ghosts. Even the powerful dark ghosts would feel fear towards Li Daochong. Even if you don't fight, I will kill you, Li Daochong continued. With that, Li Daochong flicked the Tsang ink in his hand. Pang Yi held his breath and raised the bone spear in his hand. Clang! There was a crisp sound. Pang Yi was sent flying. He had actually lost in terms of strength. Li Daochong's attack did not succeed, so he immediately chased after him. The Tsang ink directly left his hand, and the flying dagger shot towards Pang Yi like lightning. Bang! Pang Yi raised the bone spear and suddenly flicked it. Fierce flames burst out between the 2 weapons. Pang Yi was sent flying again. Damn it, why is there a divine transformation realm old monster here? Pang Yi's 2 collisions confirmed the fact that Li Daochong was a divine transformation realm old monster. Otherwise, how could Pang Yi lose to a Jin Dan cultivator in terms of strength? This was illogical. Li Daochong did not know what Pang Yi was thinking. He only wanted to kill this high-level grand wizard in front of him, absorb the dead soul, and turn it into spirit chi. Li Daocheng's attacks became more and more fierce. The Tsang ink in his hand turned into countless rays of light that could not be seen with the naked eye. Pang Yi was tired of resisting. Due to fear, he could not even use 40% of his strength. He was not in the mood to continue fighting. He only wanted to run away quickly. No matter how weak the high-level Grand Wizard was, he was not someone Li Daocheng could kill with one strike. It was already impressive that he could suppress him. The few people who were watching from below had mixed feelings in their hearts. Chu Tianqi had mixed feelings. He was sure that Li Daocheng was a witch cultivator, but what happened now was like a slap to his face. It was impossible for a witch cultivator to attack a dark ghost above the level of a witch, let alone kill a grand wizard. Li Daocheng had killed hundreds of three-headed dead spirit pythons as soon as he appeared, which explained everything. It was not a big deal that he guessed wrong. Although Chu Tianqi was a divine general, he was not a god. It was impossible for him to be right about everything. It was not as if he had not made mistakes when completing missions in the past. The reason why Chu Tianqi was shocked was not because of his own misjudgment, but because of Li Daocheng's unparalleled combat power. It was rumored that Li Daocheng had killed 2 Grand Wizard instantly. When Chu Tianqi learned that Li Daocheng might be a witch cultivator, he did not take it seriously at all. If a witch cultivator worked together with a Grand Wizard, it would be very easy for them to put on a show. Seeing is believing, and hearing is false. Chu Tianqi did not see it with his own eyes, so he did not believe it. However, Li Daocheng had just killed the 2 grand shamans in an instant, and there was nothing fake about it. Chu Tianqi had no choice but to believe it. It was just that he could not believe that a witch cultivator like Jin Dan could kill a grand wizard in an instant. Kong Lanxin's thoughts were relatively simple. She just wanted to fight 300 rounds with Li Daocheng to see who was stronger. Of course, before that, Kong Lanxin had to cultivate the Spirit Explosion Sword technique to the 5th level, which was the top level. Only when Kong Lanxin learned the Spirit Explosion Sword technique would she have the ability to fight with Li Daocheng. Li Hu's face was slightly red. He was the one who had been slapped in the face the most. It was fine that he was suspected behind his back, but he had also cursed in front of Li Daocheng. It was not until Li Daocheng killed the 3-headed dead spirit python that Li Hu realized that he had made a big mistake. His face was slapped so hard that it did not stop. After Li Daocheng appeared, the victorious army stared at him intently. Their eyes were filled with curiosity. The victorious army had lived for so long, but they had never seen such a monster. This was the first time a young lady had sat in a sedan chair after getting married. For such a monster to appear in the Federation, no matter how one looked at it, it was worth celebrating. However, they had suspected that Li Daocheng was a witch cultivator, and they did not know if it would make Li Daocheng feel bad. When Qin Zhan saw that Li Daocheng had killed 2 Grand Wizard in an instant, a smile appeared on his face. He had not misjudged Li Daocheng after all. Qin Zhan felt ashamed of his suspicion. Even if Li Daocheng was really a witch cultivator, he should not have doubted Li Daocheng without any real evidence. Qin Zhan had always boasted that he was a talent scout, and he had a pair of sharp eyes. If he doubted Li Daocheng, he would be doubting himself. Qin Zhan smiled bitterly as he looked at the Zhan Lu sword. He was glad that it was not too late. If he had really wronged Li Daocheng, he would have committed a huge sin. The battle between Pang Yi and Li Daocheng became more and more intense. The two of them fought at close range, and from time to time from afar. Occasionally, they would use their respective mystiques and dark spells to attack each other from afar. Pang Yi gradually familiarized himself with Li Daocheng's strength and fighting techniques, and he became more and more proficient in the battle. Isn't he a soul formation stage cultivator? Pang Yi finally regained some of his senses. Pang Yi launched a surprise attack and hit Li Daocheng right in the face, sending him flying like a cannonball towards a building in the distance. Li Daochong smashed the building into ruins. Before it completely collapsed, he rushed towards Pang Yi as if nothing had happened. He actually hit him? Pang Yi could not believe it, and his confidence swelled. After all, he was a high-level Grand Wizard. How many people in the Rakshasa state and the Shenghua Federation could be stronger than him? Boom! Crack! One side flashed green and the other side was white. They intertwined. A few minutes later, Pang Yi and Li Daochong each attacked thousands of times. Most of them were just probing. Li Daochong actually did it on purpose when he was hit. He just wanted to feel what it felt like to be hit by a Grand Wizard head-on. Would it be painful, or would it cause internal injuries? Or would it not feel anything at all? After actual testing, if there was no weapon, a high-level Grand Wizard's fist would not be able to hurt Li Daochong at all. The result of the test was that he did not feel anything. Pang Yi felt that he was gradually gaining the upper hand. Perhaps he would win this battle soon. Pang Yi began to get excited. He suddenly retreated a few hundred meters and threw the bone spear in his hand. A giant demon rose from the ground. It looked so real that it looked like a real giant demon. Dark spell? Li Daochong's eyes narrowed slightly. Just as he was thinking about how to break this trick, there was a sudden commotion in his arms. He looked down and saw that the Shabi, who had been sleeping for a long time, had woken up. It was unknown whether the little monkey had slept for too long or was annoyed by being woken up. It anxiously pulled open Li Daochong's collar and poked its head out of his arms. "Little thing, it's none of your business. Go back." Li Daochong patted the Shabi's head. The Shabi squeaked twice and looked at Li Daochong with grievance. It seemed to want to say something, but it was a pity that a young Shabi could not communicate with people. However, Li Daochong still caught some information from the Shabi's eyes. He smiled and said, "Are you hungry?" The Shabi nodded desperately. "What do you want to eat?" Li Daochong felt that the Shabi had been awakened by a certain smell. The Shabi pointed at the giant demon that Pang Yi had just summoned with dark spell. Li Daochong was surprised. "Little thing, can you eat that thing?" The Shabi nodded desperately again. Li Daochong still didn't believe it. He knew how strong the Shabi was. That was the giant demon totem released by the Grand Wizard Ghost. The Shabi's ability to deal with Green Ghost was already good enough, let alone a giant demon. After the giant demon appeared, it roared into the air and rushed toward Li Daochong with heavy steps. As the giant demon approached, the Shabis became more and more excited. Li Daochong had never seen the Shabi so excited. He simply tilted his head. "If you want to eat, go eat. If you can't, don't blame me." The Shabi's little monkey got permission and let out a sharp squeak. It jumped out of Li Daochong's arms. In the air, the Shabi's body grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. Li Daochong was surprised and said to himself, "The little thing just woke up and evolved." Chapter 481. The Troll was an ancient demon of the Hades abyss. It was one of the ancestors of undead creatures. It was born with the body of a Grand Wizard and could slowly evolve. After tens of thousands of years, the Troll was born with superhuman strength and could break the stars. It was tyrannical in the Hades abyss. It was more than 15 meters tall and looked like a huge gorilla, but it had more fangs. It had a pair of horns on its head. Pang Ye's most powerful move was to use the bone spear to summon a troll totem that could last for a few minutes. For the troll, a few minutes was more than enough time to crush its target. Li Daochong held the Tsang ink in his hand and was ready to attack. The Tsang ink flashed with electricity, and the spirit sun lightning was also released. As soon as the Shabi was defeated, Li Daochong would use the last layer of the 9-split blade technique to cut the troll into pieces. Just as Pang Yi was feeling proud, he saw a black shadow pounce on the troll's shoulder. At first, Pang Yi didn't care, but he was a little curious. What was so bold that it dared to climb on the troll's shoulder? Was it not looking for death? The moment the Shabi landed on the troll's shoulder, the greed in its eyes became sharper, as if it was looking at a super big cake. The Shabi monkey grabbed the giant demon tightly and opened its mouth, revealing 4 sharp and long fangs. It bit down fiercely. The troll then realized that there was something on its shoulder, but before the troll could raise its hand to slap it, its legs went soft and its huge body collapsed. The Shabi let out a sound of enjoyment and crazily sucked the huge amount of death aura on the troll's body. This death aura was actually the ancient death aura left behind on the bone spear. The bone spear was the troll's leg bone. It had been there for tens of thousands of years, but it was still intact. It showed the troll's strong vitality. The troll's corpse wouldn't rot for tens of thousands of years unless it encountered spirit chi, but its bones weren't afraid of anything. It wouldn't change even if it was stored in a spirit chi environment for tens of thousands of years. That was because the troll's bones were a very strange material. It was neither an item of the dead nor a spirit item. It was something like a zombie. The Shabi monkey absorbed the ancient death aura on the skeletal spear. The giant demon naturally could not withstand it and quickly became dispirited. By the time Pang Yi realized that something was wrong, it was already too late. More than half of the ancient death energy on the bone spear had already entered the Shabi monkey's stomach. Pang Yi quickly shot towards the skeletal spear, wanting to snatch his weapon back from the Shabi monkey's mouth. But how could Li Daochong let him have his way? A green light swept past, forcing Pang Yi to retreat. My skeletal spear! Pang Yi cried out in pain. Why would the little Shabi monkey care? After absorbing the ancient death chi, it directly picked up the skeletal spear and bit down. With a crunching sound, it chewed crisply in its mouth. In no time, the Shabi monkey swallowed the entire bone spear into its stomach. The Shabi monkey was not satisfied with its meal. It looked around and saw the 3-headed dead spirit python's corpse everywhere. It was so excited that it danced with joy. It lay on a large piece of meat and began to chew on it. Wake up to eat, eat, and sleep. This was the Shabi monkey's biggest dream in life. Now, this dream was being realized little by little. Every time the Shabi monkey ate a large piece of meat, its body would grow a little. This was not caused by eating meat, but by the bone spear and the ancient death aura that it had just swallowed. The baboon-sized Shabi monkey slowly grew to the size of a human. Li Daochong knew how powerful the Shabi was. It was one of the 10 divine beasts of the ancient spirit world. It was a powerful existence on par with the true dragon and true phoenix. Pang Ye's heart was bleeding after losing the bone spear. He had spent a lot of energy and risked his life to enter the depths of the Hades to find a giant demon's leg bone to refine the spear. Now, it was worthless and eaten by a monkey like a bone. What the hell was going on? Pang Ye's eyes were red. He let out a long howl. The muscles all over his body bulged, and the underworld language appeared on his body. You dare to challenge a grand wizard? Then I'll let you see the true power of a grand wizard. As he spoke, Pang Ye's body grew bigger and bigger until it was 10 meters tall. It looked a little like a giant demon, but it still looked more like a human. It was just that it was a little ugly. Every grand wizard could grow bigger. This was their true body. Normally, they would only grow to their normal size to save energy. After growing bigger, their strength and speed would increase. When their body size increased a few times, their strength and speed would increase a few times. However, due to the size, their movements would be a little clumsy. Pang Yi had a special technique to make up for this weakness. It was the ghost body technique. This ghost body technique was very simple. When Pang Ye's body grew bigger, it would transform his body into an existence between the ghost body and the wizard body. This way, his body weight would be greatly reduced. His strength would increase, but his weight would not increase. Naturally, his speed would be faster. Pang Yi grew bigger in the blink of an eye. He raised his giant fist and threw it at Li Daochong like a cannonball. Li Daochong's lips curled up slightly. This ghost body technique was interesting. Feeling the terrifying power, Li Daochong did not face it head-on. Before he knew how strong the fist was, there was no need to take the risk. Li Daochong used thousand sound escape and dodged instantly. He then appeared behind a Pang Yi and slashed down, directly cutting a large wound on a Pang Ye's back. Black blood flowed out from the wound. A Pang Yi roared. The pain was almost unbearable. He reached out to grab Li Daochong. Zing! With a flash of green light, his wrist was cut open. The whole hand fell to the ground and quickly shrank back to its normal size. A Pang Ye's heart tightened. His body quickly shrank back to its original size. Not only did growing bigger not give him any advantage, but it also made him a living target. That's the end of the warm-up. Grand Wizard, I'm a little disappointed. Li Daochong shook his head. Arrogant! A Pang Yi roared. Then, a bone spike grew out of his chest. He pulled it out with all his might and threw it at Li Daochong. The bone spike was extremely fast, like lightning. However, with Li Daochong using thousand sound escape, this speed was still nothing. Li Daochong dodged to the side and shot towards a Pang Yi like a bolt of lightning. His shoulder slammed into a Pang Ye's body, sending him flying. Song Imo raised his saber and slashed down. 100-meter-long blade shadow soared into the sky and fell from the sky, bringing with it 100-meter-long blade light. It was like the radiance of the heavens. Boom! A Pang Yi was hit head-on. The Grand Wizard's body was also cut in half. The huge blade light directly split half of Demon Subduing City, leaving a deep ravine that was dozens of kilometers long. Although a Pang Yi was cut in half, he did not die. The Grand Wizard's body had a very strong self-healing ability. Even if he was cut into countless pieces, he could still recover with the memory of the Grand Wizard pill. This was an advantage that human cultivators could not compare to. As long as the Grand Wizard pill did not shatter, he could be reborn indefinitely. However, when a Pang Yi tried to recover his body that was cut in half, he found that he could not recover. A large amount of violent spiritual energy rushed into each half of his body, rushing everywhere. What's going on? A Pang Yi cried out in horror. The mouths of the two halves of his body moved up and down, making sounds at the same time, overlapping each other. Li Daochong landed in front of a Pang Yi. He stretched out his hand and a Grand Wizard pill quietly fell in his palm. Half of a Pang Ye's head was sweating profusely. He said in horror, "No, don't." Li Daochong's palm wrapped around the Grand Wizard pill with spiritual energy. In an instant, a Pang Ye's body quickly decayed. "Don't kill me!" A Pang Yi did not expect that he would be killed. It was too late to realize this. He never thought that he would be killed in this battle. How could a Grand Wizard be killed so easily? A Pang Yi only spat out 2 words. The two halves of his body melted at the same time. Then, from the inside out, there was an explosion. The rupture effect completely destroyed the Grand Wizard's body. However, this time, Li Daochong did not hear the notification in his mind. This was because a Pang Yi was not killed. His body was only destroyed. The Grand Wizard pill was still in Li Daochong's hands. When Li Daochong came to 13 Specter, he had used up most of his spiritual stones and items. However, he had not received any income. This Grand Wizard pill could be considered as recouping the cost. In the Black Prison, a Grand Wizard pill was worth a lot. If it was sold to a buyer, it could be sold for tens of thousands of high-grade spiritual stones. Even if it was sold normally, it could be sold for more than 10,000 high-grade spiritual stones. Not to mention, the pill in Li Daochong's hand was a Grand Wizard's Grand Wizard pill. It was even more powerful than the average Grand Wizard pill. Once Li Daochong's spiritual qi, which contained Yang lightning, enveloped the Great Wizard core, he would be able to seal the wizard's soul completely, not daring to extend it in the slightest. Any soul body was an extremely fragile existence, and the slightest carelessness would cause the soul body to dissipate. Dark ghosts were afraid of Yang lightning. They did not even dare to touch it in their soul form. If they did, they could be completely destroyed. Li Daochong looked at the sealed Grand Wizard pill in his hand. He smiled and put it into his storage ring. 10 minutes ago, the northwest stronghold was still in despair. 10 minutes later, all of the dark ghosts gathered in front of the stronghold building were killed. Even the 3 Grand Wizard pills were easily killed. It was all because of this young cultivator. Everyone sighed. Can't you stop breathing so heavily? Even if you don't get swallowed by the dark ghosts, you'll still be scared to death. Qin Zhan, Chu Tianqi, Kong Lanxin, and the victorious army stared blankly at Li Daochong, who was descending from the sky. This guy had brought so many cultivators with him, but he didn't use any of them. All he had to do was kill his way into the void, and the problem would be solved. Since when were Grand Wizard pills so easy to kill? Could it be that the Grand Wizard pills they had just fought had taken stimulants or used some kind of secret technique to become so powerful? Li Daochong had arrived. The effects on the Grand Wizard pills had disappeared, so this guy could easily kill them. Why are you guys standing here in a daze? The battle has only just begun, Li Daochong said when he saw Qin Zhan and the others standing still. Kong Lanxin's expression changed when she heard Li Daochong's words. What do you mean? Isn't it obvious? These are only the vanguard. The real army is behind them. It won't be long before they arrive, Li Daochong replied nonchalantly. His gaze was focused on the shabby monkey. Chapter 482. In the healing room, Qin Zhan and the others were sitting cross-legged in the spirit liquid vat, soaking them in the Type 003 top-grade spirit liquid. The spirit liquid was becoming turbid at a speed visible to the naked eye, and their bodies were rapidly recovering. Li Daochong's treatment of them was the fastest way, but that would consume a lot of Li Daochong's energy. Wu Ho's army was about to arrive, and Li Daochong could not afford to have any mishaps. Therefore, he had no choice but to give up on the treatment and let them soak in the spirit liquid. However, Li Daochong still helped a little and removed some of the death aura in their bodies. The army of cultivators that came with Li Daochong quickly reinforced the stronghold's building, using all the equipment they could use to reinforce the building, as well as charging the spiritual array's protective shield. The spirit light cannon was checked to see if there was any malfunction, and the spirit sniper rearranged its hiding position. The news of the Northwest stronghold's complete victory spread like a virus, and soon, all the cultivators in the demon-subduing city knew about this news. For a moment, the depressed morale was stimulated, and many cultivators began to fly towards the Northwest stronghold in groups. After Li Daochong left the healing room, Chu Tianqi still did not understand. Tell me, if Li Daochong is not a witch cultivator and no one informed him, how did the ghost army know that the Northwest stronghold is the strongest stronghold in the entire demon-subduing city? No one knew that Lon Xin and I came to 13 Specter, except for the period of time after we arrived at the Northwest stronghold, and the only ones who left the stronghold building were Li Daochong, Yu Yan, and the 85 combat cultivators. Yu Yan and the 85 combat cultivators were actually influenced by Li Daochong's personal charm and left. Their cultivation was not high, and they were only at the foundation establishment stage, so they did not have the ability to hide from our detection. Other than Li Daochong, there was no one else, but Li Daochong is not a witch cultivator, so who was the one who informed him? Chu Tianqi's words seemed to be a bunch of nonsense, and even had a hint of self-deception. After all, he had always suspected Li Daochong, and now that he had been slapped in the face, he wanted to get back at him. At least it meant that his judgment was not wrong. It was just that the instigator was not Li Daochong, but someone else. However, the other 3 people's opinions were surprisingly the same as Chu Tianqi, because the ghost army that attacked the Northwest stronghold was too powerful. This was only the vanguard army, and Wu Ho rashly led an army to besiege the Northwest stronghold. Qin Zhan, however, had a different opinion. He shook his head and said, The problem now is not the problem of the two of you coming to the 13 Specter. Even if we know that there are people from the Divine Generals in the Northwest Stronghold, there is no need to use such a huge force to strangle the two of you, right? Is there a need? Victorious Army nodded and said, Qin-Zhan, you are right. The Rakshasa Kingdom's operation is indeed strange. To kill 2 god generals, they need to mobilize an army of 1,000,000 soldiers, and it was even personally led by the Witch Empress. Just to attack the Northwest Stronghold? To take the demon-subduing city? Everyone fell into silence for a moment. Could it be that there was some unknown treasure here? Obviously, it was impossible. The demon-subduing city had existed for hundreds of years. If there was any treasure here, it would have been dug up long ago. How could it wait until now? Then why was the Rakshasa state so interested in the Northwest Stronghold? Why did they need Wu Ho to personally lead the army to attack? Wasn't this like using anti-aircraft guns to kill mosquitoes? Wasn't it a waste of talent? Just to kill 2 divine generals? There was no need for that. Although divine generals were powerful, there was still a gap between them and a grand wizard. They could have just sent 2 grand wizards over. Why did they have to go through so much trouble? The 4 of them thought for a long time but could not think of a reason. Outside the healing room, Li Daochong did not go far. With his hearing, how could he not hear the discussion in the healing room? Yeah, that woman Cherry Blossom Gauze is crazy. In order to hunt me down and take revenge, she actually went through so much trouble and used such a huge force. Why would she do that? It's not that easy to kill me now. Li Daochong's eyes shot out a ray of light as he looked at the distant horizon. Hundreds of kilometers away, the army led by Wu Ho was getting closer and closer to the demon-subduing city. Cherry Blossom Gauze kept receiving news of victory. The east gate of the demon-subduing city was broken through, the west gate was broken through, the south gate was broken through, and the north gate was also broken through. The vanguard army was besieging the 4 important strongholds in the demon-subduing city. As long as they took down any one of them, the demon-subduing Great Formation would have to be rebuilt. However, so far, none of the strongholds had been taken down. The vanguard army had suffered heavy losses and was almost powerless to take down any more strongholds. Empress Wu Ho, these human cultivators are really tenacious. Without external support, they still managed to resist the attack of our vanguard army. Why don't we send 2,000 Wu Gui army first and take down a stronghold first? Intercourse suggested. Cherry Blossom Gauze slowly opened her closed eyes and looked coldly at Intercourse. There's no need for 2,000 Wu Gui army. You can go alone. Intercourse did not understand. Empress, why can I go alone? Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes flashed. Intercourse let out a muffled groan and took 3 steps back. The blood in his body churned, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Good for nothing, this Empress wants you to die. Intercourse was so frightened that he hurriedly knelt on the ground. Empress, please calm down. I don't know how this subordinate has offended you. Please forgive me. Cherry Blossom Gauze slowly closed her beautiful eyes, and her tone was as cold as ice. This Empress is not in a hurry, so why are you in a hurry? No one will take you for a mute if you don't speak. If you come up with any bad ideas again, this Empress will throw you into a pot of oil and fry you. Remember, this Empress is not here to take down the demon-subduing city, but to pull out Li Daochong's tendons and skin him alive. The entire army only needs to aim at the northwest stronghold. Intercourse shrunk his head and knelt on the ground. Yes, Empress Wu Ho is wise and mighty. This lowly one is rash. Cherry Blossom Gauze did not reply. She just floated in the air with her legs crossed. Her death intent shot straight ahead, searching for Li Daochong's aura at any time. Half an hour later, the black cloud that covered dozens of kilometers arrived above the demon-subduing city. Cherry Blossom Gauze opened her beautiful eyes again. She finally caught sight of Li Daochong's aura. This brat's cultivation has become so unpredictable. It has only been a few months, and he has already grown to such a level. If he is given a few years, what will happen? Almost at the same time that Cherry Blossom Gauze locked onto Li Daochong, he also sensed Cherry Blossom Gauze's aura. Li Daochong had been standing in the command room on the top floor of the stronghold, looking in the direction of the black clouds. His aura had been restrained to the extreme, and if not for the fact that the surrounding soldiers could see him, they would not have been able to sense Li Daochong's existence at all. Following Li Daochong to the northwest stronghold, other than the 8,000 cultivators that had been reorganized, there were also close to 70,000 cultivators. These cultivators were all scattered in the demon-subduing city. Because they were unable to escape from the demon-subduing city, they could only fight with the dark ghost inside the city. When the danger level of the northwest city decreased, these cultivators naturally gathered around. As the demon-subduing city was once again attacked by the dark ghost, the cultivators sensed danger and did not dare to disperse. Huddling together was the safest way right now. The black clouds pressed down, causing everyone's hearts to tremble uncontrollably. Although they could not see what was hidden within the black clouds, they could feel the incomparably oppressive aura of death. It was as if an abyss demon beast would rush out of the black clouds at any time and crush the demon-subduing city with a single kick. Qin Zhan and the others soaked in the spirit liquid vat for a period of time. With the special medicine given to them by the alchemist and the treatment of the doctor and the advanced equipment, they had basically recovered by 70 to 80%. Of course, the main reason why they were able to recover so quickly was because Li Daochong had helped them remove the death aura. If not for this, they might not have been able to recover even if they soaked in the spirit liquid vat for 7 days and 7 nights. At this moment, Qin Zhan and the others also came to the command room and stood together with Li Daochong. Everyone looked at the endless black clouds in the sky. The black clouds continued to roll, and occasionally, a muffled roar could be heard from within. Everyone was waiting for some terrifying existence to descend from the black clouds, or perhaps an army of countless ghosts. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes passed. 10 minutes passed. There was no movement from the black clouds, as if it was just a dark cloud with rain. 20 minutes later, a small white dot appeared under the black clouds. Because it was too far away, they could not see it clearly, but as the white dot continued to descend, it became clearer and clearer. A fairy-like woman in white slowly descended from the black clouds to the top of the stronghold building. Dressed in white, her body was weak, and her face was so beautiful that it was suffocating. Just a glance at her would make one's heart beat faster. A pair of sparkling and translucent feet that were like pure white jade teeth were exposed under the white dress, making one want to find a pair of shoes for her to wear, for fear that she would be frozen. The giant beast that everyone was looking forward to did not descend. Instead, a beautiful woman who looked harmless and even a little pitiful appeared. What was going on? A big question mark rose in everyone's heart. The woman in white stared at the stronghold building for a while, and finally opened her warm pink mouth. Li Daochong, did you miss me after we parted last time? Chapter 483. In fact, everyone was shocked. Every sergeant in the command room, including Chu Tianqi and the other 3, looked at Li Daochong with surprise and suspicion. Yu Yan looked at Li Daochong with her mouth wide open. She finally sorted out her thoughts and organized her words. You know her? Li Daochong stared at the cherry blossom gauze outside the window. He didn't expect this woman's opening to be so unique. He was a little surprised and didn't know how to respond. Kind of. Li Daochong replied without looking sideways. Who is she? Yu Yan continued to ask. Wu Ho cherry blossom gauze. Thump, thump, bang. The command room was in a mess. The people sitting on the chairs fell to the ground, the things in their hands fell to the ground, and some people were frightened and hit the door. Qin Zhan's scalp was numb, and Li Hu, who had always been upright, felt his legs go soft. Yu Yan almost hid behind Li Daochong. Kong Lanxin's lowly face twitched twice, and she didn't show her timidity. Chu Tianqi only felt his chest was stuffy, as if someone covered his mouth and didn't let him breathe. Victorious Army was the only one who was relatively normal among all the people present. He didn't have much expression, but he was a little curious. He had long wanted to see the real face of Wu Ho, the witch ancestor. Today, seeing her was not what he imagined. He didn't expect the witch empress to be such a delicate and beautiful woman. She was ridiculously beautiful. Victorious Army had always thought that the witch empress was a tall and sturdy witch who had lived for tens of thousands of years. She would be holding a 10,000 skulls staff, and would let out a hoarse voice that sounded like sawing teeth. Unexpected, really unexpected. Victorious Army was actually a little scared. No matter what Wu Ho looked like, she was Wu Ho, the supreme ruler of the Rakshasa state. Hades was the most powerful person in a large country, a terrifying existence that even soul formation stage cultivators couldn't match. After the cherry blossom Gauz's voice asked the question, everything returned to normal. After a long while, Li Daochong slowly said, "It doesn't matter whether Mr. Li thinks about her or not. You can't forget Mr. Li, right?" Cherry blossom Gauz smiled. That smile was enough to topple a city. "Li Daochong, you really know me. In that case, you should know why I'm here. Do you want a one-on-one or a group fight?" Li Daochong curled his lips. "What's the difference?" Cherry Blossom Gauz smiled even more brilliantly. "Of course there's a difference. If it's a one-on-one, I'll kill you first, then kill the others without using a single soldier. If it's a group fight, the Ghost Army will suppress the border, and not even a blade of grass will survive. I'll still kill you, and the others will be killed by the Ghost Army. Tell me, is there a difference?" Li Daochong touched his chin and pretended to think. "Well, there's a difference. I wonder if there's a third option?" Cherry Blossom Gauz looked at Li Daochong through the floor-to-ceiling window with a smile. "Tell me, if I think it's suitable, it's fine." Li Daochong nodded and said, "I'll fight you one-on-one. If I lose, the demon-subduing city will belong to you, and you'll let the others go. How about that?" Cherry Blossom Gauz tapped her chin with her index finger, looking indescribably cute. One couldn't see the majesty of the ruler of the Rakshasa state at all. Instead, she looked more like a little girl next door who stayed at the door of a dessert shop and looked at the delicious desserts in the window. She wanted to buy them and try them, but was worried that she would get fat. "You're sacrificing yourself for righteousness." Cherry Blossom Gauz suddenly thought it through and said. Her eyes curved into crescent-shaped arcs. "Just tell me if it's okay or not." Li Daochong said bluntly. "Of course not. Do you think I'm that easy to talk to?" Cherry Blossom Gauz refused straightforwardly. Her voice was crisp and pleasant. "You don't." Li Daochong shook his head. "Then that's it. Are you stalling for time with me? Do you want to come out yourself, or do you want me to crush the building with my palm and force you to come out?" Cherry Blossom Gauz's tone didn't change. There was a hint of excitement in her cheerful tone, but her words were gradually becoming more domineering. "Why are you so fierce? Wait, I'll come out." Li Daochong's reply was equally cheerful and bright. The conversation between the two didn't seem like they were mortal enemies who were about to fight to the death. It was more like a pair of friends who had known each other for a long time flirting with each other. "I'll wait for you. If you don't come out in 3 seconds, I'll make my move," Cherry Blossom Gauz said with a smile. Li Daochong disappeared on the spot. In the next second, he appeared outside the stronghold building. He was floating in the air less than 10 meters away from Cherry Blossom Gauz. "Li Daochong, you're quite obedient. If it weren't for the fact that you've ruined so many of my plans and made me sullen, I wouldn't have killed you. With such good materials, it'll be great to make a voodoo puppet," Cherry Blossom Gauz said with satisfaction. "Forget about the voodoo puppet. I'd rather disappear into the wind than become a voodoo puppet." Li Daochong raised his eyebrows. Oh, is that so? Alright, then I'll make you into a voodoo puppet. It's decided. Cherry Blossom Gauze was overjoyed, as if she had found something interesting to do. As she spoke, Cherry Blossom Gauze grabbed at Li Daochong with her jade-like hand. The latter's eyes flashed, and he dodged instantly. It seemed like a casual grab, but there was an invisible force behind it. A shadow flashed past. A building behind where Li Daochong was floating just now collapsed. Everyone finally realized what kind of existence Wu Ho was. With just a casual grab, a building hundreds of meters away was completely destroyed. What kind of power was this? It was unimaginable. Li Daochong's relaxed expression disappeared, and his gaze turned cold. Wu Ho had always appeared harmless, but when she really attacked, Li Daochong immediately felt a monstrous killing intent. Wu Ho wanted to kill him. She was serious. Li Daochong activated his telekinesis, and Song Ink instantly shot out. The green light shot toward Cherry Blossom Gauze like a bolt of lightning. Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't dodge at all. She simply floated there, reached out her jade-like arm, and flicked her finger lightly. Clang! Song Ink, who had turned into a green light, was repelled. Li Daochong only felt his throat go dry. What the hell, it was resolved so easily. Li Daochong, you're a little naughty. Why don't you just follow Sister Wu Ho to the Hades and play? It's fine if you dodge, but you still want to use a knife to attack Sister. Don't you think that's too much? Cherry Blossom Gauze was still talking to Li Daochong in a playful tone. Li Daochong was no longer in the mood to talk to Cherry Blossom Gauze. Song Ink returned to his hand, and without any hesitation, he slashed out with his knife. 9 Split Blade Technique's 5th stage, Star Slashing Slash. A ray of light like starlight shone from the blade. Cherry Blossom Gauze still didn't move. She opened her palm, and a round black transparent shield appeared. Clang! Another crisp sound. Li Daochong only felt his arm go numb. He flew back for more than 10 meters before coming to a stop. Li Daochong's most powerful technique, the 9 Split Blade Technique, couldn't even break through Cherry Blossom Gauze's transparent shield. Li Daochong felt a chill run down his spine. He seemed to have been a little arrogant. He thought that he should be able to fight Cherry Blossom Gauze, who hadn't recovered her cultivation. Even if he couldn't win, the battle wouldn't be too ugly. However, after a few probing moves, Li Daochong realized that the gap between him and Cherry Blossom Gauze was not small. Was this an existence beyond the divine transformation stage? Even in her peak state, she could still crush everything. Chapter 484. Facing Cherry Blossom Gauze, Li Daochong was not confident, but he did not panic. He would still fight as he should. The probing process could not be omitted. Li Daochong had no idea how strong Cherry Blossom Gauze was. However, Li Daochong was not afraid of fighting Cherry Blossom Gauze to the end, since he had the 1000 Sound Escape as his trump card. If he really couldn't beat them, he could lure Cherry Blossom Gauze away. As for the ghost army in the black clouds, Li Daochong was not worried. 120,000 level 12 enhanced talismans were enough to give them a hard time. Cherry Blossom Gauze was the biggest threat. As long as she was not around, Li Daochong believed that according to the previous arrangements, under Yu Yan's command, the ghost army would definitely be blocked. At the very least, they could hold on for a week. When the reinforcements arrived, the Rakshasa states planned to capture Demon Subduing City and completely destroy 13 Specters. Human cultivators would fail. Therefore, Li Daochong was not in a hurry to fight Wu Ho. He could slowly fight and play. Li Daochong still had a Grand Wizard pill with him. Originally, he wanted to bring this Grand Wizard pill out of 13 Specter and sell it in the Black Prison to earn back his losses and interest. However, Wu Ho's strength was far beyond his expectations. This Grand Wizard pill could be a great guarantee for Li Daochong to recover his spiritual energy in times of crisis. Li Daochong only needed to crush the Grand Wizard pill, and a Pang Yi would be completely killed. The sole power of a high-level Grand Wizard was enough to revive Li Daochong, who was at the end of his life. Thousand Sound Escape and Grand Wizard Pill. Li Daochong's protection in this battle was quite solid. At least, his life was not in danger. Li Daochong's star/missed, but he was not in a hurry. Nine Cracks saber technique was no longer his strongest move. It was perfect for testing a strong opponent. Although Cherry Blossom Gauze easily resolved this attack, she did not dare to use her body to resist it. Instead, she used the dark art and turned it into a circle. From this, it could be seen that Cherry Blossom Gauze did not dare to take Li Daochong's attack head-on. A thought flashed in Li Daochong's mind, and the uneasiness he felt earlier quickly vanished. His lips curled up slightly as he tightened his grip on the azure ink saber. In the blink of an eye, he slashed. This time, he used even more strength. The sixth stage of the 9-split saber technique, sun-breaking slash. The light of the blade shocked the clouds. The light was like a rainbow in the sky. The only difference was that rainbows had 7 colors, while the light of the blade was only 1 color. At that moment, the dark void seemed to be illuminated by a green sun. It was like a flash of lightning. The corner of Luo Yingsha's eyes flashed, and a white longsword appeared in her hand. The sword was slender and white, and it looked like a bone that had been weathered for many years. It was about 1.6 meters long. In the dark clouds, Intercourse saw Cherry Blossom Gauze's weapon and gasped. The Ghost King's sword, a heavenly wizard treasure. That's not right. This Ghost King sword isn't complete. Xiang Yu quickly realized that if it was the real Ghost King sword, once it was unsheathed, everything within 10,000 miles would wither. All living things would be devoured by the Ghost King spirit in the sword. The vitality of heaven and earth would be dim. When Cherry Blossom Gauze took out the Ghost King's sword, nothing special happened. The only thing that happened was that the death aura became stronger. Intercourse was not the only one who recognized the origin of Cherry Blossom Gauze's weapon. In the base building, Chu Tianqi, Kong Lanxin, Victorious Conqueror, and Qin Zhan all recognized the terrifying Ghost King's sword. Can Li Daochong do it? A hint of worry flashed across Kong Lanxin's face. It doesn't matter. We can only rely on him, Victorious Conqueror said. As a great cultivator at the peak of the Yuanying stage, Victorious Army Chang only saw Li Daochong's 2 moves, and he could be sure that this young man's strength was the highest among all the people present. Luo Yingsha didn't use any underworld technique or cultivation method. She simply swung her sword to block Li Daochong's saber strike. Clang! The crisp but not ear-piercing sound of metal colliding sounded like the sound of some kind of musical instrument. No one felt the slightest discomfort when they heard it. The terrifying aftershock did not appear either. The afterglow of the blade aura flashed and disappeared. Li Daochong's face darkened. His attack seemed fierce, but it disappeared after entering the sea. It was easily swallowed by the sea. Cherry Blossom Gauze's death chi was unimaginably powerful. It easily broke Li Daochong's sun-shattering slash. When the power reached a certain level, any technique would be redundant. Li Daochong immediately launched the second attack. It was the 7th stage of the 9 Cracks saber art, splitting the void. This attack was not fast and the blade aura was very small. It was like a comet with a tail. The tail was not big. However, the penetrative power of this attack was many times more powerful than the previous 2 attacks. It could even penetrate an endless mountain range. Cherry Blossom Gauze was surprised. Li Daochong's reaction speed was much faster than she had expected. He was infinitely close to becoming a soul formation grand cultivator. This kid's growth was unbelievable. A few days ago, the Intercourse took Li Daochong's attack. Cherry Blossom Gauze received the full blow. However, Li Daochong was much more powerful than a few days ago. If Li Daochong was as powerful as he was now, the Intercourse would not have been able to escape death even with the help of Cherry Blossom Gauze. Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes flashed coldly. She withdrew the Ghost King's sword. She stretched out her hand and pointed with her index finger. A white glow expanded and shot out from her finger. Clang! The blade aura and the white glow collided in the air and disappeared with a sound. Li Daochong licked his lips and did not stop at all. He struck out with his saber again. Cherry Blossom Gauze was easily neutralized. Clang, clang, clang. The crisp sound of metal colliding could be heard in the air. Cherry Blossom Gauze's white figure was ethereal. She was calm and composed. Li Daochong's green figure was like lightning. He followed her like a shadow. The speed of the two was not something the others could keep up with. By the time they saw the sword and saber clashing together, it had already happened a few seconds ago. At that moment, the two were already fighting fiercely a few kilometers away. Intercourse's fear of Li Daochong grew stronger as the battle progressed. No one knew better than Intercourse how terrifying Wu Ho was. She was invincible in the Rakshasa state. However, this human cultivator was able to force Wu Ho to use her weapon. Just this point alone was enough to make him proud. Intercourse could not even withstand Wu Ho's aura. Was this human cultivator only at the Jin Dan stage? How was this possible? Intercourse felt that his worldview was quickly collapsing. In fact, Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze had only been probing each other. They had not used any real killing moves. Intercourse's thoughts were not wrong. Wu Ho's strength had already surpassed that of an ordinary existence. She did not even need to make a move to crush everything. She could kill a grand wizard with a single glance. She could tear apart a witch ghost with a single breath. She could simply release a bit of her death intent and completely destroy a lowly creature. Cherry Blossom Gauze had used these methods to deal with Li Daochong. Ever since she floated down from the black clouds and locked onto Li Daochong, she had used all of her death intent attacks and powers. However, it was useless. Li Daochong's entire body was enveloped in a thick layer of divine sense. Cherry Blossom Gauze's death intent could not penetrate it at all. To put it bluntly, telekinesis was a type of magnetic field. Cherry Blossom Gauze's magnetic field could not do anything to Li Daochong's magnetic field. Cherry Blossom Gauze could destroy an ordinary cultivator in a single move. However, she could not do the same to Li Daochong. This was also the reason why Cherry Blossom Gauze had no choice but to land in the void outside the stronghold building. She stared at Li Daochong for a long time through the floor-to-ceiling window and finally said those words in a teasing manner. It was all because Cherry Blossom Gauze could not kill him with her death intent. Otherwise, Cherry Blossom Gauze would not even need to show herself to understand everything. Why would she go through the trouble of personally making a move? It was precisely because of this that Cherry Blossom Gauze developed a strong interest in Li Daochong. This human cultivator had a secret, and it was a huge secret. At first, Cherry Blossom Gauze did not think in this direction. She only thought that Li Daochong was a monstrous genius among human cultivators that was hard to come by in 10,000 years. In the tens of thousands of years since the beginning of the human cultivation era, such monstrous geniuses had appeared before. However, when Cherry Blossom Gauze realized that her heavenly witchcraft dark energy was ineffective against Li Daochong, she realized that something was wrong no matter how slow she was. Li Daochong was definitely hiding some shocking secret. When Cherry Blossom Gauze realized this, her obsession with killing Li Daochong had mostly dissipated. Capturing him alive became even more important. Chapter 485. Li Daochong executed the 9 split saber technique step by step. Cherry Blossom Gauze countered his every move with ease. It was a simple test, but in the eyes of onlookers, it was earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Li Daochong held Song ink for the first time. A sense of helplessness welled up in his heart. A heavenly mystery true treasure was useless against Wu Ho. Of course, Song Ink had never truly reached the level of a heavenly mystery true treasure, because Song Ink had never had a saber spirit. Why did you stop? Are you done? Wu Ho looked at Li Daochong, who had suddenly stopped. Li Daochong did not reply. Instead, he suddenly disappeared. Cherry Blossom Gauze smiled faintly. Her eyes flashed. Li Daochong, are you trying to play speed in front of me? Are you trying to humiliate yourself? Cherry Blossom Gauze disappeared as well. The next moment, she appeared in the sky far away, her lily-white hand grabbing out. Li Daochong's figure appeared at the same time. Cherry Blossom Gauze's lips curled into a smile. However, her lily-white hand grabbed empty air. Cherry Blossom Gauze was rather surprised that she had not been able to capture Li Daochong's true movements. Over here. Li Daochong's voice came from behind her. Cherry Blossom Gauze did not turn around. She was about to slash out with her sword. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Two talismans instantly shot out from Li Daochong's hands. They were strengthened level 13 talismans. Cherry Blossom Gauze suddenly turned around and pushed out her lily-white hand. A wave of air surged out. Boom! The two level 13 talismans exploded more than 10 meters away from Cherry Blossom Gauze. The wave of fire burned the clouds, and a huge mushroom cloud rushed into the sky. The aftermath of the explosion spread all the way to the ground, and the buildings that were already on the verge of collapse all collapsed, leaving only the stronghold building standing alone in the ruins. More than half of the northwest district of Demon Subduing City was razed to the ground. After the mushroom cloud with a diameter of 1 kilometer soared into the sky, the flames in the void gradually disappeared. Cherry Blossom Gauze was still standing there in her white dress. The terrifying explosion had no effect on her at all. Li Daochong felt a little regretful. He had thought that they would be of some use. These two level 13 talismans had been made in his spare time in the past 3 days. They were a little rough, and the materials were not complete. Therefore, their power was naturally reduced. However, it was still much stronger than a level 12 talisman. It was enough to kill a high-level wizard ghost, and was a great threat to a grand wizard ghost. Although the explosion just now didn't have much of an effect on Luo Yingsha, it still startled her. There was a split second when the Witch Empress thought they were spirit talismans that were above level 18. The explosive spirit chi wave produced by these two spirit talismans was rather similar to the super spirit talisman that injured her years ago. Cherry Blossom Gauze's expression changed slightly. The smile on her beautiful face disappeared, and she turned into a white light that shot toward Li Daochong. Li Daochong, you were the one attacking. Now it's my turn. Netherworld Dead Souls / The Ghost King sword created a huge white sword aura that was several kilometers long, as if it was going to split the sky in half. Li Daochong was as small as an ant under the sword aura. Li Daochong's throat went dry. Looking at the huge sword aura coming toward him, he slashed out with the Tsang ink in his hand, and lightning flashed on the saber. Heavenly Thunder Spell, Thunder Calamity Saber. This was a move that Li Daochong had comprehended after he had leveled up and integrated the Yang Thunder into the Nine Cracks saber art. Boom! The huge sword aura collided with the saber aura that carried the power of thunder. The two terrifying forces collided, and a shockwave that was even more terrifying than the previous two level 13 talismans exploded. The entire void seemed to be torn apart, and a flash of light could be seen clearly outside the 13 Specter. Li Daochong was sent flying several kilometers away by the shockwave. Only a few strips of cloth were left on his green robe, but he wasn't injured at all. Li Daochong used his telekinesis, and a brand new set of green robes appeared on his body. The disadvantage of not having a decent set of robes was revealed at this moment. If he had a decent set of robes, at least his clothes wouldn't have been torn apart by the shockwave. Li Daochong felt that he lacked robes, but he didn't need their protection. At his level, that little bit of protection was no longer important. Li Daochong just felt that it was troublesome to change clothes all the time. It was also very troublesome to be exposed all the time. Cherry Blossom Gauze looked at the speck of green in the distance with a hint of fear in her eyes. Cherry Blossom Gauze had used 70% of her strength in that attack. Even a soul formation grand cultivator wouldn't dare to take it head-on, but Li Daochong had done it. Besides, apart from the fact that his clothes had been torn apart, he seemed to be unscathed. Li Daochong, you must have a secret, a big secret. I'm going to get to the bottom of it, Cherry Blossom Gauze murmured to herself as a look of certainty appeared in her eyes. How could a Jean Dan cultivator unleash an attack that was comparable to a soul formation grand cultivator's and infinitely close to a divine power? Cherry Blossom Gauze's white dress fluttered even though there was no wind. The energy around her body suddenly changed. It had been in a gentle state all this time, but it suddenly became violent. The huge ghost army in the dark clouds in the sky sensed the underworld death chi around Wu Ho's body, and hundreds of thousands of them began to tremble at the same time. Intercourse, their legs trembled as if they were mice that had seen a cat. Cherry Blossom Gauze's beautiful figure flashed and appeared in front of Li Daochong as if she had teleported. Then, she threw a punch. Li Daochong's eyes widened. Cherry Blossom Gauze's attack was very sudden. Bang! Li Daochong gritted his teeth and raised his hand to block the attack. An indescribably terrifying energy landed on Li Daochong's forearm. Li Daochong fell into the distance like a shooting star. A few seconds later, the horizon in the distance exploded and a cloud of dust rose into the air. Just as everyone was worried that Li Daochong would be severely injured, an azure shadow suddenly shot out from the cloud of dust. Li Daochong's clothes were tattered and his face was covered in dust. However, he looked as if nothing had happened. He threw a punch without any fancy decoration. It was just a plain punch. Slap! Cherry Blossom Gauze raised her hand and blocked it with ease. Li Daochong, you're a little too confident. Do you think punching me will work? Cherry Blossom Gauze sneered. How do you know if it will work if you don't try? Li Daochong replied. Cherry Blossom Gauze was about to say something when she suddenly realized that something was amiss. She saw a flash of lightning on Li Daochong's arm. Bang! Cherry Blossom Gauze wanted to withdraw her hand from Li Daochong's fist, but it was too late. The lightning flashed by. Cherry Blossom Gauze snorted softly. Black smoke rose from her hand. Then, with a crack, she flew back. Even the Witch Empress was apprehensive of the power of the Yang Thunder. Cherry Blossom Gauze raised her translucent palm. Black smoke rose from her palm. A small part of her palm had been charred. Cherry Blossom Gauze's body emitted a white stream of energy that gathered in her palm. The charred part quickly disappeared and returned to normal. Cherry Blossom Gauze had just recovered when Li Daochong appeared in front of her again. He threw another punch. This time, his entire fist was wrapped in electricity. Cherry Blossom Gauze's beautiful face revealed a trace of shock. She hurriedly raised her hand. Crack! She was once again sent flying by the lightning. This time, the lightning was even stronger than before. Cherry Blossom Gauze's entire hand was charred black. Ghostly energy gathered once more and restored it to its original state. Cherry Blossom Gauze was a little annoyed. She muttered a few words, and a pair of ghostly white gloves appeared on her hands. Ghostly spider silk gloves. Li Daochong threw another punch. Bang! Cherry Blossom Gauze also threw a punch. The two fists collided. Bang! A shock wave spread out in an instant. Fortunately, they were in the void. The shock wave spread out on a flat surface and did not affect the ground. If they were on the ground, the collision between Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze would be enough to raise half of Demon Subduing City to the ground. The stronghold building would also be destroyed by the shockwave. Bang! 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 Dull sounds kept coming from the void. Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze exchanged more than 1,000 punches in the span of a few breaths. Each punch contained enough power to defeat a grand wizard. Li Daochong, you are the first human cultivator who can fight one-on-one with me until now. Even 1,000 years ago, human cultivators had to gather together to fight me. If you fight me alone, you will only be killed by me. You are only in the Jin Dan realm, and yet you can fight me head-on. What kind of secrets are you hiding? I am getting more and more interested. Today, no matter what, I will peel you open layer by layer and see what good things are hidden inside. Cherry Blossom Gauze said with ease under the fierce battle. Li Daochong's heart skipped a beat. Although he did not show any changes on the surface, his heart was in turmoil and his emotions were unstable. Finally, someone was starting to doubt him. Li Daochong's expression gradually turned cold. His punches became faster and faster. After countless punches and another exchange, Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze separated. Li Daochong's patience had almost completely disappeared after hearing Cherry Blossom Gauze's words. Li Daochong's secret was his biggest reverse scale. No one could pry into it. He would not let anyone know about this secret. He could not even let anyone suspect him. If anyone suspected him, then that person must die. Li Daochong's murderous aura became more intense. The blood in his body was stimulated without reservation. His blood was boiling. The test was over. The real battle was about to begin. The moment the two separated, Li Daochong did not stop. His eyes flashed with a blue-gold brilliance. 2 balls of lightning rotated violently in his eyes. Heavenly Thunder Technique, Eye of Thunder Punishment. Boom, boom. 2 terrifying bolts of lightning shot out from Li Daochong's eyes. Like lightning tribulations from the 9 heavens, the 2 terrifying bolts of lightning shot towards Cherry Blossom Gauze. Wu Ho could not avoid the speed of the lightning. Li Daochong's move came without warning. Although Cherry Blossom Gauze had been on guard against Li Daochong's move, she could not accurately predict when Li Daochong would use this move. Up until now, Cherry Blossom Gauze had been restraining herself. She did not use her full strength because she was afraid of Li Daochong's move. Cherry Blossom Gauze could not react in time. She was struck by the 2 bolts of lightning. The lightning power passed through her body and wandered around Cherry Blossom Gauze's body. Excruciating pain spread throughout Cherry Blossom Gauze's slender body. Her skin was charred black. Within the black clouds, within the building of the stronghold, both the ghost army and the human cultivators were stunned by the lightning unleashed by Li Daochong. In that instant, they felt as if they were witnessing the power of the lightning tribulation that Yuanying had to endure. Li Daochong stared at Cherry Blossom Gauze. His emotions calmed down slightly, but his breathing quickened slightly. He had used his full strength. He did not hold back in the slightest. His Eye of Thunder Punishment was at full power. Could it be that Li Daochong won? Kong Lanxin's eyes widened in disbelief. Everyone else held their breaths as they looked up at Wu Ho. It looked as if she was about to be completely engulfed by the lightning. Chapter 486. Cherry Blossom Gauze was enshrouded in violent lightning power as yang lightning surged into her body, burning every inch of Wu Ho's body. Pain spread throughout her entire body, as if she were being gnawed on by tens of thousands of ants. Even the abyssal lightning prison of the Hades couldn't compare to this. Cherry Blossom Gauze's face became even paler as the crimson light in her eyes dimmed. Cherry Blossom Gauze slowly closed her eyes as the chi of death in her body slowly receded. Several seconds later, the terrifying chi of death in Wu Ho's body disappeared without a trace from Cherry Blossom Gauze's body. No one could sense that Cherry Blossom Gauze was still alive as lightning continued to wreak havoc on her beautiful body. Crackling sounds continued to ring out. She's dead? All the cultivators in the building held their breaths as they couldn't believe that Li Daochong had killed Wu Ho just like that. Did he win? Yu Yan murmured. I think so. Li Hu stuttered as he replied. At this moment, this young military officer, who had a lot of complaints about Li Daochong, was completely stunned. The divine generals had always been an unshakable and sacred existence in Li Hu's heart, but at this moment, the man hovering in mid-air seemed to have become extremely tall and mighty in his eyes, as if there was a dazzling light radiating from his body. A few days ago, Rado Shinji didn't think much of Li Hu's nickname for Li Daochong, as he thought it was nothing more than an exaggeration made up by inexperienced cultivators. Only after witnessing it with his own eyes did he realize that not only was Rado Shinji not exaggerating, he was actually downplaying Li Daochong. Only soul formation stage cultivators were worthy of the title Perfected Lord. Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin both felt a little awkward. They were members of the Federation's divine generals, but they were completely useless in this crucial battle. His limelight had been stolen by an unknown young man. Furthermore, after the Federation's Central Committee had a discussion, they even suspected that he was a shaman cultivator. As representatives of the investigation, Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin felt like they had been slapped in the face. If it weren't for Li Daochong, everyone here would have died. Qin Zhan couldn't suppress the joy in his heart. A smile appeared on his face as he looked at Li Daochong in the distant void. He had a sharp eye for people. Not only did Li Daochong not disappoint him, but he also far exceeded his expectations, reaching a level that Qin Zhan did not even dare to imagine. This guy seemed to have no limits. With such a talent in human cultivation, not to mention the Rakshasa state, the entire Hades would tremble. If Li Daochong was given a few more years, what would he become? Qin Zhan couldn't imagine it, and neither could he. Because Li Daochong's growth could no longer be measured by conventional thinking. His appearance had transcended all limits. The Shenghua Federation's divine transformation stage was the limit, but for Li Daochong, the Shenghua Federation's divine transformation stage was nothing. Qin Zhan's eyes suddenly lit up. Was this guy related to the three cultivation empires? In the last pure land of the spiritual realm, the three cultivation empires were the last hope to counterattack the Hades. Not only were there humans, but there were also many other races that had been devoured by the Hades. They were now attached to the embrace of the humans. They were constantly thinking about the day when they could take revenge and bring the damned Hades back home to revitalize their race. Was this guy a descendant of a super cultivation group in the three cultivation empires, or a descendant of a marshal? Li Daochong, how can you be so strong? Yu Yen stared at Li Daochong in a daze. Every time she thought she had enough understanding of Li Daochong, this guy would immediately show more unknown sides, making her feel lost again. Li Daochong, human cultivation is a blessing. The victorious army said loudly, and his heart surged with the desire to befriend him. To be able to know such a monster was a great joy in life. The ghost army in the dark clouds had the opposite mentality from the human cultivators. Wu Ho's aura had disappeared. How was this possible? The insufferably arrogant queen of the Rakshasa state was killed by a guy that they had never heard of? For a moment, the Grand Wizard who was in charge of the ghost army couldn't accept it. The intercourse reacted even better. The night demon cloak was already at the ready to vanish and flee as soon as the situation turned bad. With Wu Ho dead, Li Daochong alone could heavily injure hundreds of thousands of ghost army soldiers. Not even the Grand Wizard would be able to take a single blow from him. Moreover, there were still tens of thousands of human cultivators down below. The battle between cultivators and dark ghosts had never been won by numbers. From a certain perspective, the ghost army was nothing more than cannon fodder for the high-class voodoo ghosts. They had only one purpose: to consume the spirit chi of the humans. The humans relied on cultivation technology to create a large number of artifacts and spirit machines to resist the dark ghosts. Once the ghost army lost its commander, it was like a headless fly that had been decapitated. In the air, Li Daochong stared at Wu Ho. He also couldn't sense Cherry Blossom Gauze's aura. Even after scanning Cherry Blossom Gauze with his divine sense, he couldn't sense the slightest bit of death energy. Dead? Li Daocheng's eyes flickered with uncertainty. This was a little too simple. Was this all Wu Ho could do? Li Daocheng didn't dare to be careless in his confusion. He felt that something was wrong, even though he truly couldn't sense Cherry Blossom Gauze's aura. Li Daocheng was still worried. He slightly raised Song Ink, and lightning energy began to flow along the saber. If one didn't remove the roots, the grass would grow again in the spring breeze. Even if Cherry Blossom Gauze really was dead, Li Daocheng couldn't help but feel uneasy. The first time he had met Cherry Blossom Gauze, she had also been lying in a stone coffin, completely unharmed. Li Daocheng's eyes flashed coldly. Whoosh! His figure disappeared, and he instantly appeared in front of Cherry Blossom Gauze. He swung Song Ink and slashed at Cherry Blossom Gauze's neck. Li Daocheng didn't feel the slightest bit of pity for this beautiful woman. He knew very well what kind of existence she was. If she didn't die, billions of people would die. Just as Li Daocheng raised his saber, Cherry Blossom Gauze's peacefully closed eyes suddenly opened. Her previously dim pupils suddenly emitted a blood-red glow. The death energy that had disappeared poured out like a volcanic eruption. This aura was completely different from ordinary death energy. It was an aura that Li Daocheng had never sensed before. It was ethereal and lifeless, like the death void in the depths of the nether abyss. Death energy contained the desire to destroy everything, including resentment, hatred, greed, anger, distortion, and many other destructive emotions. But at this moment, Cherry Blossom Gauze's aura didn't contain such emotions. This wasn't death energy. At least, it wasn't the death energy that Li Daocheng recognized. This was an aura of nothingness and emptiness. It was deep and dark, hidden and quiet. To put it simply, it was nothingness. It was an aura of nothingness that drowned out everything. Li Daocheng suddenly thought of a term that he had once read in an ancient book: nether aura. In the Hades, death energy was actually a low-level aura. There were two other auras above death energy. They were the source of death energy. One was the demonic aura that made all living beings pale. The other was the mysterious nether aura. Li Daocheng's hair stood on end. An intense sense of danger made him immediately use the thousand-sound escape and retreat. Song Ink, which was about to slash down, immediately stopped. Nether aura surged out and filled the entire space in the blink of an eye. It pushed out all the death energy and spiritual energy within a 10-kilometer radius. Everything else was annihilated. The lightning energy on Cherry Blossom Gauze's body was still roaming. At this moment, it exploded with sparks of electricity that grew more and more dazzling. Finally, with a pop, the sparks of electricity disappeared. The charred parts of Cherry Blossom Gauze's body fell off piece by piece, dispersing in the wind. Her skin was even more translucent than before, as if it had been carved from white jade. It was glossy and smooth, without the slightest blemish. At this moment, Cherry Blossom Gauze only looked at her appearance. It was impossible to imagine that she was an underworld ghost of the Hades ancestor level. She was a transcendent, immortal cultivator, so beautiful that it was difficult to breathe. How could the land of the dead underworld have given birth to such a beauty? This was completely illogical. The ghost army in the black cloud was shaken, but the human cultivators in the building all revealed expressions of shock and fear. The nether aura made every underworld ghost in the ghost army feel incomparably carefree and happy. Under the baptism of the nether aura, they seemed to become even stronger. However, the human cultivators sensed the exact opposite. This feeling of emptiness and solitude was even more frightening than those of desires. Even if emotions were negative, at least they were alive and had life. The feeling of nothingness and nothingness was even more terrifying than death. In truth, the opposite of life was not death, but nothingness. Death referred to the death of the body, but the soul still existed. Nothingness referred to the death of the body and the destruction of the soul. This was truly terrifying. Cherry Blossom Gauze's current state made everyone realize just what kind of existences the only two ancestor-level underworld ghosts of the Rakshasa state were. Li Daochong felt his throat go dry, and he actually felt somewhat apprehensive. Li Daochong had never felt apprehensive when encountering any underworld ghost. This was the first time he had felt apprehensive since awakening. Li Daochong, it really hurt when you hit me just now. Cherry Blossom Gauze looked at her arms and said in an extremely calm tone. But this tone, which sounded like a casual conversation, made one's hair stand on end. Li Daochong's throat went dry, and every nerve in his body went taut. Whoosh! Cherry Blossom Gauze appeared in front of Li Daochong and lightly swatted down with her jade-like hand. This time, Li Daochong didn't even see how Cherry Blossom Gauze had moved. Li Daochong instinctively raised his hand, relying mostly on luck to block Cherry Blossom Gauze's casual swat. Slap! There was a crisp sound like the sound of someone swatting a mosquito. He couldn't sense any power. But the moment Li Daochong was swatted, he felt an intense pain in his arm as a terrifying and irresistible energy assaulted him. Li Daochong plummeted to the ground like a shooting star. Boom! Chapter 487. In the deep pit, Li Daochong's clothes were destroyed again. When he put on a new set of clothes, Cherry Blossom Gauze appeared in front of Li Daochong. She raised her hand and flicked her middle finger. Li Daochong hurriedly raised Song ink in his hand. Clang! Her jade finger flicked on the body of the azure ink saber, giving off a melodious sound. The sound was pleasant, like the sound of musical instruments hitting each other. Li Daochong felt numb between his thumb and forefinger. He flew backward again. His feet dug into the ground, but it was useless. He retreated dozens of meters and crashed into the wall of the deep pit, sinking 100 meters deep. Li Daochong's spiritual body was strong. He was not hurt, but his thumb and forefinger were cracked and bleeding. Li Daochong's face became more and more serious. He was no match for her at all. After Cherry Blossom Gauze's state changed, he could only parry. He could not even fight back. This passive feeling annoyed Li Daochong. But there was nothing he could do. Li Daochong did not have many trump cards left. He only had the Great Void swordsmanship left. But he had never used this swordsmanship. Li Daochong was not sure if he could use the profound meaning of the Great Void swordsmanship. This swordsmanship was obscure and difficult to understand. But Li Daochong had the hot-blooded level-up device, so he could finish it in an instant. When you learned this swordsmanship, you would find that there were very few moves in this swordsmanship. There were not even as many moves in the 9 cracks saber technique. The so-called Great Void referred to the mysterious realm of solitary emptiness. To some extent, it was similar to the ghostly chi emitted by Cherry Blossom Gauze. But Great Void was not void. Great Void referred to the most primitive substance of all things in the universe, chi. And nihility referred to emptiness. There was nothing. Great Void referred to a kind of Tao appearance. Tao was big and empty. The Great Void referred to Great Void. To put it simply, the higher void was the realm, while the nether chi was the state. Although there were similarities, their essence was completely different. Apart from the Taishu swordsmanship, Li Daochong had used all of his moves on Cherry Blossom Gauze, including the divine telekinesis attack. Li Daochong's telepathic telekinesis attack was almost at the same time as Cherry Blossom Gauze's death will attack. When the latter appeared, Li Daochong tried to attack her with telepathic telekinesis. However, when Li Daochong's divine telekinesis hit the Cherry Blossom Gauze, he couldn't sense anything. It was as if it didn't exist at all. This was the first time Li Daochong had encountered such a situation. Li Daochong licked his dry lips. This battle was much more difficult than he had imagined. If the Great Void swordsmanship was useless, Li Daochong would really be at his wits' end. From the moment he woke up until now, Li Daochong had been growing through leveling up, fighting monsters and battling. In less than 2 years, Li Daochong had experienced countless battles, and he had never felt as exhausted as he was now. Facing so many opponents, Li Daochong had always felt that he had many trump cards up his sleeve. Any one or two of them would be enough to defeat or kill his opponent. However, even after Li Daochong's cultivation and strength had improved by leaps and bounds, these moves were still ineffective against Cherry Blossom Gauze. In particular, the Eye of Thunder punishment was useless against Cherry Blossom Gauze. This made Li Daochong feel a sense of helplessness. There were only 6 moves in the Taishu swordsmanship. Every move contained the profound Great Tao of the Great Void. Although Li Daochong had learned the swordsmanship, his understanding of the profound mysteries had yet to reach the Tao realm. Li Daochong was just a beginner. However, even at this initial stage, its might was already unimaginably great because even with Li Daochong's current cultivation, he could only execute 2 moves. However, Li Daochong was no longer in his best condition after using the Eye of Thunder punishment with all his might. He could only use 1 move now. As Li Daochong's thoughts flashed, Cherry Blossom Gauze appeared in front of him again. There was an indifferent smile on her breathtakingly beautiful face. Li Daochong was smashed 100 meters into the wall of the pit, creating a cave that was 100 meters long. However, the cave was not dark. The Tsang ink in Li Daochong's hand was still flashing with sparks, illuminating the surroundings. Cherry Blossom Gauze's demonic eyes shot out blood-red brilliance. There was a mocking smile in her blood-red pupils. Li Daochong, you are still far from being my match. Even if you cultivate for 1,000 years, you won't be my match. My awakening was ruined by you, causing my realm to drop. If I was in my best condition, your federation would have been destroyed by the Rakshasa state. You have ruined my plans and hindered the Rakshasa state's march into the Federation. You have committed such a heinous crime. As long as you tell me your secrets, I can still consider not killing you. What do you think? Cherry Blossom Gauze said slowly. Cherry Blossom Gauze's sudden words made Li Daochong's eyes move slightly. This was a little different from Wu Ho's previous state. Li Daochong smiled coldly in his heart. Wu Ho actually wanted to bargain with him. Could it be that there was a limit to her current state? Or could it be that she couldn't unleash her true strength? If that wasn't the case, Wu Ho could have used her overwhelming advantage to capture him. If she wanted to find out the secret, the Hades had many ways. Even if Li Daochong knew that the Blood Spirit Upgrader was powerful and mysterious, he couldn't guarantee that it was flawless. The Hades's dark arts were strange and terrifying. There might be a way to detect the Blood Spirit Upgrader. Wu Ho hadn't reached her perfect state and her strength hadn't recovered, but she could already suppress him. If she was in her best condition, how strong would she be? Li Daochong didn't dare to imagine. Li Daochong had his thoughts, but Cherry Blossom Gauze was a little anxious. Just now, she had received a message from the underworld from the Hades. Xing Paoluo had announced that he would give her to the son of the Netherworld Demon Clan's patriarch as his wife. Cherry Blossom Gauze couldn't return to her peak state, so her strength was greatly reduced. This made Xing Paoluo very angry. The Rakshasa state had planned for so long to awaken Cherry Blossom Gauze so that she could return to her peak state. In the end, although the plan succeeded, it wasn't much different from a failure. Because there wasn't another dark ghost at the Ancestor Sorcerer level, the Rakshasa state's plan to attack the Federation had to be delayed for a while. Moreover, there was no time limit. Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't know when she would be able to fully recover. On the surface, Xing Paoluo's attitude towards Cherry Blossom Gauze was good, but secretly, he had been working on the marriage. Cherry Blossom Gauze knew that if Xing Paoluo couldn't conquer the Shenghua Federation, the 4 underworld nations wouldn't wait patiently any longer. The 4 underworld nations had always been drooling over the fertile land occupied by the Rakshasa state. However, the 4 underworld nations were constantly in conflict with each other, so they weren't united. In addition, the 4 underworld nations had been fighting against the 3 human cultivation empires, so they had no time to divert their attention to the Rakshasa state. Of course, another reason was that the Shenghua Federation's cultivation techniques weren't weak either. If the Rakshasa state didn't block them, the Shenghua Federation would be bordered by one of the 4 underworld nations, the 9 underworld nation, which would greatly increase the pressure on the 9 underworld nation. Therefore, the Rakshasa state was of great strategic importance. It was also because of this that the Rakshasa state was able to occupy this fertile land and transform it into the Hades, thus establishing the Rakshasa state. The Rakshasa state was a very young country in the Hades. It was established 1,500 years ago by Xing Paoluo, who had just become a wizard ancestor, and a few trusted grand wizard. At that time, the demon clan had just been exterminated, and the Hades was about to invade the human clan. However, recently, for some reason, the 9 underworld nation suddenly developed a strong interest in the Rakshasa state's Rakshasa essence. They wanted to plunder the Rakshasa state, both openly and secretly, and even had thoughts of annexing it. This made Xing Paoluo very distressed. If he couldn't handle it well and angered the 9 underworld nation, the Rakshasa state wouldn't be the unlucky one. The 9 underworld nation wouldn't remove the natural barrier that was the Rakshasa state. They only needed to send the underworld demons to kill Xing Paoluo and the Grand Wizard. Xing Paoluo had been having a hard time recently. He didn't even have the mood to devour the vitality of the stars to cultivate. He had been plotting something. Although the initiator of the large-scale attack on the Shenghua Federation was the cherry blossom gauze, it was also tacitly approved by Xing Paoluo. Otherwise, how could the huge ghost army of the Rakshasa state be mobilized so easily? The weak should be beaten, the weak should be bullied. This law was even more obvious in the Hades. Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't expect Xing Paoluo to sell her out. Back then, when the Rakshasa state was established, so many small countries in the Hades were destroyed. Cherry Blossom Gauze had made great contributions to the war. When the Hades invaded the human race, Cherry Blossom Gauze was besieged by many human powerhouses in order to stall for time. She was severely injured and had no choice but to escape. After that, she randomly found a cultivation planet and hid in a rock cave to sleep. This sleep lasted for 1,000 years. In the end, not long after she woke up from her sleep, Xing Paoluo sold her out because her strength hadn't fully recovered. Cherry Blossom Gauze had sensed it, but she still didn't believe that Xing Paoluo would really sell her out. After receiving the news, Cherry Blossom Gauze's mind spun rapidly. Millions of thoughts flashed through her mind, almost simulating all possibilities. In the end, she felt that there was only one way to control her own fate, and that was to become strong enough to suppress Xing Paoluo, and even make the Jiuyou state wary. Only then could she protect herself. The son of the Jiuyou state's netherworld demon clan didn't want to marry Cherry Blossom Gauze out of pure love. That guy wanted to steal Cherry Blossom Gauze's spirit vitality. If Cherry Blossom Gauze really married the son of the netherworld demon clan's patriarch, she would be finished. Not only would all her years of cultivation go down the drain, she would most likely become a puppet of the son of the netherworld demon clan's patriarch. The netherworld demon clan was the most perverted underworld demon in the Hades. Any woman of any race could become their cultivation vessel. Cherry Blossom Gauze would rather die than marry the son of the netherworld demon clan's patriarch. Of course, no one wanted to die before reaching that stage. Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't want to die either. Chapter 488. Cherry Blossom Gauze stared at Li Daochong with her bewitching eyes, trying to catch the changes in Li Daochong's expression. She wanted to see through the changes in Li Daochong's heart. However, Li Daochong's expression did not change at all. Cherry Blossom Gauze could not tell what this young human cultivator was thinking. Cherry Blossom Gauze knew that human cultivators were very unyielding. Most of the time, they would rather self-destruct than compromise. The reason why Cherry Blossom Gauze suddenly made such a request to Li Daochong instead of using force to suppress him was because she was worried that Li Daochong would self-destruct. Several seconds of silence. Li Daochong's face revealed a half-smile. He said calmly, "Cherry Blossom Gauze, I don't know what you're talking about. Secret? What secret? Is it something you've imagined? As for killing me, I'm afraid it won't be that easy." Cherry Blossom Gauze's beautiful face turned cold. "Li Daochong, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit." Li Daochong smiled contemptuously. He did not say anything. Suddenly, he raised his sword and Cherry Blossom Gauze's Ghost King sword appeared in an instant. The two weapons clashed against each other. With a loud boom, the ground exploded. Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze flew out from it. However, the former was in a sorry state and was once again sent flying far away. The latter was not affected at all. Instead, he flew leisurely into the void. However, the changes in their expressions were poles apart. Cherry Blossom Gauze's expression was gloomy, while Li Daochong was relaxed. If one had not seen the previous battle, one would have thought that Cherry Blossom Gauze was the passive party and Li Daochong was the one who had the initiative. Li Daochong changed into another set of green clothes. In this battle, the thing that annoyed him the most was the constant change of clothes. Although Li Daochong's green robe was not some powerful robe, the material was still quite exquisite. It was made from the golden silk of the fire silkworm. However, in a battle of this level, the tough golden silk of the fire silkworm was as brittle as hair. Li Daochong, reconsider. We can make a deal. Not only will I not kill you, but I can also give you many benefits. As long as you appear, the Rakshasa state will not take the initiative to attack you. We can live in peace. Cherry Blossom Gauze's tone of arrogance had completely disappeared. Moreover, this time, Sakura Shah had used telekinesis to transmit her voice, so only Li Daochong could hear her. Li also wants to make this deal, but unfortunately, we don't have the goods. How can we make the deal? Empress Wu Ho, are you asking Li to fabricate something out of thin air? Li Daochong curled his lips and transmitted his voice. Li Daochong, even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for the millions of cultivators on 13 Specter, right? Are you planning to let everyone die with you? For the country, for the people I care about, so what if I die? The cultivators on 13 Specter are either exiled criminals or soldiers of the cultivation army. They came here with the determination to die, so why would they die with me? Empress Wu Ho, you suddenly changed. Don't tell me there's something you can't say. Why don't you retreat? I'm very magnanimous. I can let you go, and I won't pursue you. What do you think? Li Daochong replied calmly with a hint of ridicule at the end. Li Daochong was testing Cherry Blossom Gauze. There must be a reason for this woman's sudden change. Li Daochong, once 13 Specter is lost, you should know what it means, right? As long as the Rakshasa state completely occupies 13 Specter, your Shenghua Federation will never have a day of peace. Cherry Blossom Gauze made a final effort to persuade Li Daochong. Wanting to completely occupy 13 Specter? I don't think it's that easy. The Rakshasa state seems to be attacking ferociously, but they haven't pushed the front line much. It's just that 13 Specter is a little tight, but the other areas are evenly matched. Judging from the current battle situation, your goal has been 13 Specter from the very beginning. The fierce attacks in other areas are just to delay the Federation's divine transformation cultivators and elite troop. You want to end the battle with 13 Specter quickly, but unfortunately, you haven't achieved your goal. You may seem strong now, but I think you're just an arrow at the end of its flight. As long as I delay you, it'll be difficult for the Ghost Army in the Black Clouds to take down Demon Subduing City, unless you make a move. Li Daochong calmly analyzed. Cherry Blossom Gauze listened to Li Daochong's analysis. Her delicate face was filled with uncertainty. Not only was this guy's combat strength strong, but his mind was also terrifyingly clear. Threats and promises were all useless. Do you really think that this queen is reluctant to kill you because of your secrets? Cherry Blossom Gauze's tone sank again, and her eyes were filled with murderous intent. "Ha, kill me. You can try." Li Daochong laughed. "Li Daochong, you're too confident. Since you're unwilling to make a deal with this queen, then die. This queen has her own ways to dig out your secret." Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes narrowed, and she finally gave up on the possibility of negotiation. "Then come, let's see if you can kill me." Li Daochong licked his lips, and the way he looked at Wu Ho was a little different from before. Cherry Blossom Gauze's show of weakness made Li Daochong see the possibility of defeating her. This possibility made him smell the fragrance of a delicious meal. How much soul power would he get from killing Wu Ho? He might even be able to rise by 2 ranks. Cherry Blossom Gauze gritted her teeth. Was her situation really irreversible? It seemed that she had no choice but to kill Li Daochong, or capture him and search his soul. With that thought, Cherry Blossom Gauze's beautiful figure turned into countless illusory figures. There were more than 10,000 Cherry Blossom Gauze in the air. It was impossible to tell which one was real and which one was fake. Li Daochong's eyes flashed with blue-gold lightning. Using this move on other people would naturally make them dizzy, but it was useless against Li Daochong. The Eye of Thunder punishment could not only shoot out lightning, but also telekinesis. It could lock onto the real body in a matter of minutes. Li Daochong's lips curled up. He could see through Cherry Blossom Gauze's real body with a single glance. Just as Li Daochong was about to attack, several Cherry Blossom Gauze flew towards him, turning into white shadows. Li Daochong did not want to interfere, but suddenly felt that something was wrong, and hurriedly raised his hand to block. Several Cherry Blossom Gauze suddenly merged into a single Cherry Blossom Gauze shadow, and charged towards him. Bang! Li Daochong was hit and flew backwards, crashing into the ground and creating a large crater. However, before the debris from the explosion could fall, Li Daochong had already returned to the void, and his green robe was in tatters again. Rip! Li Daochong casually tore off his shirt, revealing his muscular upper body. After nearly 2 years of polishing, not only did Li Daochong's body become a spiritual body, the lines of his muscles were also as if they were carved by a knife. They were not bulging muscles, nor were they thin muscles and bones. They were in a state that was just right. It would be too much if it was too little, if it was too little, if it was too little. He was neither bloated nor thin. He looked thin with clothes on, but was muscular when he took them off. Every inch of his skin was full of elasticity. It was not white nor black, but a faint bronze color. Li Daochong's telekinesis moved, and his picturesque figure was immediately covered by a brand new green robe. Li Daochong looked at the void with a sharp gaze. These shadows could not only confuse, but also attack. In the void, tens of thousands of Cherry Blossom Gauze looked at Li Daochong in unison. The real Cherry Blossom Gauze was annoyed. Although Li Daochong could not defeat him, he had not done much damage to him after several direct hits. The death aura was basically useless against him. This guy was like a cockroach that could not be killed. The Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes focused, and the dark aura around him surged violently. Pilgrimage of the 10,000 Underworlds. Tens of thousands of Cherry Blossom Gauze shadows instantly shot towards Li Daochong. At such a short distance, there was no way he could dodge at such speed. The real body was mixed in with them. Li Daochong was already prepared. The 2 sword shadows in the taiji pattern in his palms spun rapidly, making a buzzing sound. Li Daochong's eyes locked onto the real body and shouted, "Heaven's sword, life and death are on a thin line." Whoosh! The Tsang ink in Li Daochong's hand had disappeared, and he slashed out with 2 fingers. Chapter 489. The two sword lights that didn't seem to have any power actually contained a terrifying power. Of course, Cherry Blossom Gauze's pilgrimage of the underworld was not some mediocre technique. It was equally terrifying. Countless phantoms rushed toward the sword rays. The sword rays were solid. The phantoms would explode and disappear as soon as they came into contact with the sword rays. The two sword rays slashed toward Cherry Blossom Gauze's real body. They did not seem to be fast, but they seemed to have locked down the space around them and rendered them immobile. Cherry Blossom Gauze sensed the power of the Great Path. It was a profound power of the spiritual energy laws, similar to the Hades nether chi. Damn it, this brat still has a trick up his sleeve. Cherry Blossom Gauze gritted her teeth. Although the sword rays were sharp, they did not pose a threat to Wu Ho. The pilgrimage of the underworld could not block the sword rays. Cherry Blossom Gauze had already lost all face. This move was one of the more powerful moves Cherry Blossom Gauze had. But it did not seem to be enough to kill Li Daochong. The two sword rays suddenly flashed. They accelerated again and slashed toward Cherry Blossom Gauze. Humph! Cherry Blossom Gauze snorted. She raised both her hands and flicked her fingers. Two white lights shot out. Bam bam! The white lights collided with the sword rays. The white lights were annihilated. It was ineffective. Cherry Blossom Gauze's beautiful eyes widened. She seemed to have underestimated the power of the two sword rays. Cherry Blossom Gauze hurriedly activated the Hades King sword. Swoosh! The sword struck out like lightning. Boom! It collided with one of the sword rays. The other sword ray continued to slash through the air. Cherry Blossom Gauze reached out with both hands and clasped her palms together. But her jade-like hands caught the sword ray. The moment Li Daochong was hit by the worship of 10,000 nether, he happened to see this scene. A hint of helplessness appeared on his face. Wu Ho was Wu Ho after all. Even the Great Void Sword technique was useless. After these two sword strikes, Li Daochong's entire body collapsed. The spiritual energy in his body seemed to have been sucked dry in an instant, leaving only a few traces. The power of the two sword auras was extremely terrifying. Perhaps their power did not seem to be as imposing as the 9-split saber art. If the 9-split saber technique looked like a high-end and high-class technique, then the 9-split saber technique was actually quite powerful. Then, the Great Void swordsmanship was low-key, luxurious, and profound. If the two sword auras were to slash at a planet, they would be able to leave an indelible mark on a medium-sized planet. Breaking mountains and rivers and destroying seas were trivial matters. Changing the landscape was what was truly terrifying. With a single slash of the sword, a mountain range that stretched for hundreds of kilometers could be cut in half. This was no longer a set of sword technique. It was simply a divine ability. With such great power and destructive power, it was no longer a cultivation technique. Even so, Wu Ho blocked the sword auras with only a pair of bare hands. Since then, Li Daochong had used all the moves he could, but none of them were effective. At present, Li Daochong was no match for Wu Ho. If Wu Ho had not been holding back, Li Daochong would have been defeated long ago. After the two sword auras flashed by, thousands of phantoms were slashed into the air and disappeared. The remaining 2,000 to 3,000 phantoms merged together, forming a giant phantom's cherry blossom gauze. They put their palms together and swooped down. Li Daochong had no time to dodge. He could only cross his arms above his head to block. Boom! The giant phantoms hit Li Daochong head-on. There was an intense explosion. Li Daochong flew backward like a cannonball and fell into the mountain range dozens of kilometers away. The super high speed caused Li Daochong's body to create intense friction with the air, forming a fireball. With a long flaming tail, he streaked across the sky. A few seconds later, a giant mushroom cloud erupted on the other side of the mountain. A mountain peak collapsed. The shockwave swept up a cloud of dust that spread for dozens of kilometers. On the other side of the mountain, Li Daochong lay naked in a giant pit that was more than 5 kilometers in diameter and hundreds of meters deep. The green clothes on his body had been burned away by the flames as they streaked across the sky. Li Daochong grimaced in pain as he looked up at the sky. However, his line of sight was blocked after a few dozen meters. The sky was filled with dust, and everything was chaotic. Li Daochong almost thought that he was going to die from this attack. At this moment, his body felt like it was falling apart. Li Daochong wanted to raise his hand, but he could not do it. His body had been sucked dry. If not for the passive defense mechanism of the hot-blooded upgrader, which blocked most of the attack, Li Daochong would have lost an arm or a leg and broken a dozen bones even if he did not die. This was the strongest external attack Li Daochong had ever encountered. He had almost died. The alarm of the hot-blooded upgrader went off. Even so, Li Daochong had suffered serious internal injuries. Blood kept flowing out of the corner of his mouth. Li Daochong held a black crystal the size of an egg in his hand. It was a Pang Ye's Grand Wizard pill. If he crushed it, he would be able to obtain a large amount of spirit qi. However, Li Daochong could not do such a simple action. Li Daochong tried to clench his hand, but his hand did not listen. He could not use any strength at all. "I won't die today, right?" Li Daochong smiled bitterly after several failed attempts. However, Wu Ho did not attack immediately. On the other side, the human cultivators in the northwest stronghold building looked serious. After Li Daochong was hit, his energy quickly weakened until it completely disappeared. Even a soul formation grand cultivator might not be able to withstand such destructive power, someone in the command room whispered. The others were silent. Judging from the terrifying fire cloud that erupted from the mountain, Li Daochong's body might not even be left of it, let alone alive. The flames that streaked across the sky were enough to burn Yuanian cultivators into ashes. All these speculations were not without basis. After the explosion, Li Daochong's energy completely disappeared. Nothing was left. At first, Qin Zhan and the others did not believe it. After all, there would be some errors in the detection of immortal will. Qin Zhan and Yu Yan immediately activated the most advanced spirit qi radar in the command room. After 3 rounds of detection, they did not detect Li Daochong's energy. Yu Yan's face was pale. She looked at the mountain in the distance. She could not believe that Li Daochong had died just like that. "Commander Yu, where are you going?" Seeing Yu Yan suddenly walk out, Li Hu was worried that she would do something stupid, so he stepped in front of Yu Yan and blocked her way. "Get out of my way," Yu Yan said coldly. "Commander Yu, you can't leave the Vanguard Regiment anymore. All the Vanguard combat cultivators need you. Besides, the dead can't come back to life." Li Hu did not move. He had already seen that Yu Yan's feelings for Li Daochong were unusual. Now, he was even more convinced. "Get out of my way," Yu Yan said expressionlessly. She did not even look at Li Hu. As for what he was saying, she did not even listen. Li Hu still wanted to say something, but Qin Zhan raised his hand and signaled him not to say anything. "Commander Yu, if you want to avenge Li Daochong, please calm down. The cruelest war is about to break out. Don't be willful," Qin Zhan said earnestly. How could he not feel heartache? Such a good talent had died just like that. After hundreds of years, there was finally a cultivator who had the potential to fight Wu Ho head-on. But now, he had fallen into the abyss. How could Qin Zhan, who loved talent as much as his life, not feel heartache? How could he not feel pity? However, before Qin Zhan could finish his words, Yu Yan's extremely cold voice sounded again. "Get out of my way. Commander Yu, please calm down. It's useless for you to go out now." Li Hu was also anxious. Yu Yan's killing intent surged. She stretched out her hand and a dagger appeared in her hand. She raised her hand and swept it towards Li Hu's neck without any mercy. She really wanted to kill Li Hu, who was blocking her way. Everyone was stunned. Was Yu Yan crazy? In fact, Yu Yan was calmer than ever. She was not crazy at all. Her mind was very clear. However, she was only thinking about one thing at the moment, which was to collect Li Daocheng's corpse. Even if it was just a bone, it would be fine. Yu Yan didn't want this kid who saved her life to die in a foreign land. Of course, there was also an indescribable feeling in the depths of her heart. Was it because she loved talent? Yu Yan herself couldn't explain it clearly. At this time, Yu Yan's mind kept drifting back to Li Daocheng not long ago when he was silently healing her. She pestered him endlessly and even slapped him, but he didn't bat an eyelid. In fact, Yu Yan struggled at that time not only because of her self-esteem, but also because the place where Li Daocheng's palms were placed was very sensitive. If he moved down a little, he would touch Yu Yan's soft and sensitive parts. Yu Yan was shy and nervous at the same time. Yu Yan looked charming and flirtatious on the surface, but in fact, she was a traditional woman to the bone. She had been in the army for so many years. Except for talking, no one had touched her, and no one dared to touch her. And since she knew Li Daocheng until now, Yu Yan had many intimate contact with Li Daocheng. Although they didn't do anything that crossed the line, if others patted Yu Yan's shoulder, they might have their hands chopped off. From this, it could be seen that Li Daocheng's preferential treatment and tolerance had far exceeded the ordinary category. Yu Yan's strength was far above Li Hu's. When the dagger came down, the latter didn't have any time to react. At that moment, Li Hu thought he was dead for sure. At this critical moment, a long spear came flying over. Dang, a crisp sound. Yu Yan took 2 steps back and pushed Li Hu away with the long spear. The one who made the move was the victorious army. He immediately said, "Let her be." Li Hu was frightened and looked at Yu Yan with a look of looking at a madman. He was dumbfounded. Yu Yan actually wanted to kill his comrade in arms for a young cultivator she had only met a few times. Crazy, really crazy. Yu Yan didn't look at anyone. She didn't attack Li Hu, but at this moment, if anyone blocked her way and didn't get out of the way, she would do her best to clear the obstacles. Chapter 490. In the air, Cherry Blossom Gauze and the sword Aura were locked in a stalemate for a few seconds before violent ghostly energy gushed out from her palms. Smack! The sword Aura disappeared with a crisp sound in Cherry Blossom Gauze's hands. The other sword Aura that clashed with the Ghost King's sword was also swallowed by the Ghost King spirit in the sword. The Ghost King's sword flew back to Cherry Blossom Gauze's hands. There was a clear crack on the sword. Cherry Blossom Gauze lowered her head and looked at her fair palms. There was not a single piece of flesh on her palms that was intact. Her skin was torn and most of her flesh was charred black. Cherry Blossom Gauze could not withstand the void spiritual energy on the sword Aura. Cherry Blossom Gauze circulated her energy a few times. The ghostly energy flowed through her palms, but the wounds did not heal. They were only slightly better. Cherry Blossom Gauze raised her delicate hands and licked her palms with her pink tongue. This action was gentle and soothing, but it was extremely seductive. Her tongue was warm and moist, but it matched with Wu Ho's identity and the terrifying power that she had just displayed. In the eyes of others, this action was like an injured netherworld dragon licking her wounds. You were able to injure me at the Jin Dan stage. Li Daocheng, if you reach the Yuanying stage, won't I be no match for you? Cherry Blossom Gauze muttered to herself as she licked her hands. A cold light shot out from her pair of demonic eyes. Li Daocheng's threat lingered in Cherry Blossom Gauze's heart. However, at this moment, Cherry Blossom Gauze was not in a hurry. This was because Li Daocheng's aura had disappeared. Even if he was not dead, he was not far from it. Cherry Blossom Gauze's telekinesis was unable to accurately sense Li Daocheng's condition after he was sent flying dozens of kilometers away. The reason why Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't immediately pursue after breaking the sword beam was because the spiritual energy in her body had also become chaotic. The Cherry Blossom Gauze had no choice but to regulate his breathing. If he forced it, it was very likely that he would spit out a mouthful of blood and suffer internal injuries. Which empress should we launch the attack? Xiang Yu's submissive question came from the black cloud. Cherry Blossom Gauze's brows twitched. Li Daochong was harder to deal with than she had imagined. She couldn't let anyone notice her current state, including the ghost army in the dark clouds. Luo Yingxiao wasn't sure if Xing Paoluo's men were in the ghost army, but if there were, they might be able to spread the news. Once Xingpalo found out about his strength and the extent of his injuries, Xingpalo might immediately send someone to 13 Specter to capture him. Xing Paoluo hadn't made a move on Cherry Blossom Gauze all this time because he didn't fully understand the latter's abilities. The only thing he was sure of was that Cherry Blossom Gauze had yet to recover to her peak state. However, there was a saying that a cornered beast would do anything in desperation. Xing Paoluo didn't want to force Cherry Blossom Gauze too much, but this was also based on the fact that he didn't know much about Cherry Blossom Gauze. If Xing Paoluo knew everything about Cherry Blossom Gauze, then the next thing would be simple and violent. In the Hades, everything depended on strength. If you were strong enough, any creature in the Hades would respect you. If you weren't strong enough, then sorry, anyone could play with your head or even kill you with a raise of their hand. Cherry Blossom Gauze knew the rules of the game in the Hades, so she couldn't show any signs of weakness at this moment. Not even the slightest sign of injury. In fact, Cherry Blossom Gauze wasn't injured. She could fully recover after a few minutes of rest, but even so, she couldn't show any signs of weakness. Xing Paoluo's spies were all over the Rakshasa state. The battle between her and Li Daochong had probably been seen by the witch ancestor who had ruled the Rakshasa state for 1,500 years. Cherry Blossom Gauze didn't know what measures Xing Paoluo would take. Obviously, she couldn't stay in the Rakshasa state any longer. Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes flashed. She could only escape first. What was the best situation to escape? Of course, it was in a chaotic situation. Cherry Blossom Gauze glanced at the stronghold below and said coldly, "Attack." Intercourse received the order and was overjoyed. He couldn't suppress his hunger. With Li Daochong dead, what was there to be afraid of? They were all just food. Intercourse raised the commander's seal and roared, "Demons and monsters, ghosts and demons, dead spirits and underworld beasts, it's time to eat. Go, enjoy your delicious meal." Intercourse's voice had just faded when ghostly wails and howls came from the rolling black clouds. Shadows and ghost beasts swarmed out like a swarm of bees. Densely packed, they charged out of the black clouds and dived towards the northwest stronghold below in a triangular formation. Groups of rotting dragons, roaring Balrog crocodile, soul capturer ghost king, green face fanged, red shadow malicious ghost, vengeful bones, ghost king, king of Kukui. Almost all the dark ghosts that Li Daochong had encountered before were present. The sky was pitch black, like a black waterfall pouring down in torrent. The northwest stronghold building stood alone in the ruins. Tens of thousands of cultivators were gathered inside. Half of them were inside the building, while the other half were outside the building. Everyone looked up at the ghost army that filled the entire sky. A faint protective barrier covered the top of the stronghold building, enveloping a hemispherical space with a diameter of 300 meters and a radius of 150 meters. However, the protective barrier's energy seemed weak and could dissipate at any time. The area within a radius of more than 10 kilometers had been ravaged by the constant battle. Broken streets could be seen occasionally on the ground, but most of the area had been scorched black. Li Daochong and Yu Yan, the two leaders who had led tens of thousands of cultivators here, were not present at the moment. Fortunately, Tang Guangbei and Qian Feng were still here. In the past 2 days, these two had become the third and fourth leaders after Li Daochong and Yu Yan. Apart from these two, Ning Xiujie, Ling Fei, and Xiao Ying had all been assigned tasks before coming. Li Daochong had already made arrangements, but he had never expected that Yu Yen would leave to save him. Looking at the black mass of the ghost army, Qin Zhan was completely disheartened. Even with the injection of tens of thousands of new blood, which greatly increased the strength of the northwest stronghold, they could not resist such a large ghost army. Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin looked at each other and saw a trace of desperation in each other's eyes. Of course, there was also helplessness. As divine generals, the two of them had never thought that they would fall on 13 Specter. There was no way out now. The victorious army held the penetrating rainbow spear in his hand. With a buzz, he said in a rough voice, "Let these bastards come. Today, this father will sweep away thousands of soldiers and beat all of you back to your hometown." With that, the victorious army rushed out to meet the enemy. "General Chang, don't be impatient. We may not lose." Tang Guangbei's old voice suddenly sounded. As soon as Tang Guangbei's words came out, except for Qianfeng, everyone in the command room looked at him with a strange expression. "Not lose? Old man, who are you trying to fool? The ghost army numbered at least hundreds of thousands. With just tens of thousands of cultivators and those spirit stones that were almost exhausted, how could they resist so many ghost soldiers? Could it be that they were scared out of their minds?" Qin Zhan and Tang Guangbei had met a few times and knew how powerful this special-grade spirit sequencer was. But at this moment, he looked at Tang Guangbei in silence. He couldn't understand why this old man would say this at this time. The victorious army glanced at Tang Guangbei. "Old man, if you have something to say, just say it. The protective shield won't last long." Tang Guangbei didn't bicker with the victorious army. His old eyes flashed with brilliance. 120,000 strengthened level 12 spirit talismans. Whether or not they were useful, it was enough to make the ghost army suffer. Looking at the void, Tang Guangbei didn't panic and casually threw a signal talisman in his hand. Qin Zhan and the others in the command room didn't know what this action meant. They all looked at him blankly. Whoosh! A blue brilliance shot out. In an instant, some of the cultivators in the building began to move. Some quickly flew to the roof, some went downstairs, and some scattered in front of the windows on every floor of the building. In the entire stronghold building, as long as there were windows, they occupied the area. A total of 3,000 cultivators and 5,000 combat cultivators gathered in the open space outside the building under the leadership of Ning Xiujie and the others. They were on standby. "Old man Tang, what are you doing? Is this a drill? The fire is already burning the door, and you still have time to put on an act." The victorious army couldn't wait to mock him. "Old man Tang, what are you doing? Don't waste any more time. With so many ghost soldiers, any kind of formation is useless," Li Hu said from the side. Then, he gave an order to a young officer beside the command platform. "Fire the spirit light cannons." "Yes." The young officer immediately responded. Qianfeng frowned and glanced at Li Hu. He couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. Qin Zhan was a talented commander. He was indeed good at fighting, but he was a little indecisive when it came to using people. With Li Hu's personality, he wasn't suitable to be an assistant at all. It was only because he had followed Qin Zhan for many years that Qin Zhan kept him in consideration of their relationship. However, this guy's abilities were limited and he was stubborn. At this time, Qin Zhan didn't say anything, but he gave orders without permission. What the hell? Qianfeng was a Yuanian cultivator after all. He said coldly, "Deputy Li, wait a moment." Li Hu didn't want to listen to Qianfeng, but since Qin Zhan didn't say anything, he couldn't say anything. He could only say, "Old man Tang, if you continue to be mysterious, you will delay the entire battle. Even if we can't win, we have to try our best to injure the ghost army. We will miss the best opportunity." Tang Guangbei didn't seem to hear him. He just stared at the ghost army's movements outside the window and waited quietly. In just a few seconds, Tang Guangbei shot out another signal talisman. This time, it emitted a red light. Almost at the same time, every window in the stronghold building shot out rays of light. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Chapter 491. Watching the talisman lights shooting into the sky, everyone in the command room looked at Tang Guangbei as if they were looking at an idiot. Talismans? Was this the old man's trump card? It was useful. Previously, he had used up tens of thousands of talismans and couldn't even take down a rotten dragon. Elder Tang, you said the talismans were what we relied on to stop the ghost army? Li Hu asked in a daze, his eyes full of doubt. Qin Zhan, you should change this adjutant of yours. How did he become the deputy commander when he's so immature? Qian Feng finally couldn't help but ask. In fact, Qin Zhan's eyes were also full of doubt. The talismans in the Northwest Stronghold's inventory were the highest grade talismans the military could produce. They were grade 8 talismans. These talismans were enough to pose a huge threat to Foundation establishment cultivators. If thousands of them were used together, their power would be enough to wipe out the ghost army's front line. It would cause great damage. Malicious ghosts would be killed instantly. Malicious ghosts would also be annihilated after being hit by a few talismans. Grade 8 talismans were the highest grade talismans the cultivation army could carry in batches. There was no way to mass-produce any higher-grade talismans. However, Qin Zhan knew Tang Guangbei's character. This old man was considered a reputable person in the circle of spirit sequencers. The Tang family was also a big family in the Federation. Tang Guangbei wasn't the type to exaggerate. Qin Zhan stared at the brilliance of the talisman outside the window and waited quietly. Of course, he had also heard Qian Feng's words. Li Hu had been impatient these past few days, and Qin Zhan had been thoroughly disappointed. However, he was in need of people now. 13 Specter was sealed, so Qin Zhan didn't have many people he could use. He had no choice but to let Li Hu continue to be the deputy commander. If they survived this time, the first thing Qin Zhan did when he returned to the Northwest Stronghold's headquarters was to transfer people. Li Hu was indeed not qualified to be the deputy commander. He was too immature. Tang Guangbei didn't care about the questioning gazes around him. His old eyes calmly looked outside the window. The beams of light in his eyes were like powerful spirit light cannons. Each beam was dazzling and resplendent. Li Daochong, let me see how powerful your talismans are. Tang Guangbei was filled with anticipation. There was quite a bit of discussion in the command room. Many of them did not try to hide it, and some even mocked Tang Guangbei for being deliberately mystifying. Most of them were dissatisfied and felt that Tang Guangbei was joking with their lives. Boom! A deafening sound was heard. Only then did everyone in the command room look out the window again. The first talisman instantly exploded when it hit the rotting dragon flying cavalry at the front. In an instant, the carrion-winged cavalry was annihilated, but the power of the explosion did not disappear. A mushroom cloud with a diameter of more than 20 meters soared into the sky. All the ghost soldiers within 100 meters were engulfed by the flames and disappeared in an instant. They were burned into nothingness by the spiritual fire. What? Someone cried out in shock. Qin Zhan sucked in a breath of cold air. The victorious army slowly narrowed their angry eyes. Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin looked surprised. The four of them naturally saw through the clues. The power of the talisman was beyond their imagination. Boom, boom, boom. Mushroom clouds exploded and spread out in the void. The black mass of ghost soldiers instantly became live targets. Because they were densely packed together, each terrifying explosion would take away hundreds of nether ghosts. The fire talisman was just the prelude. The ice talisman followed closely behind. Icy chi filled the void, as if the entire sky was frozen. Then it was the thunder talisman. Boom! A bolt of lightning struck down. Hundreds of ice sculptures that were frozen in an instant were shattered and exploded into nothingness. In just a few breaths, the void was in chaos. The power of 3,000 level 12 talismans was enough to pose a threat to Yuanian cultivators. If hit head-on, the Soul Catcher Ghost King would be instantly annihilated. In just one shot, more than half of the Ghost Army's vanguard was wiped out. Tens of thousands of ghost soldiers completely disappeared before they could react. Among them, there were even thousands of Soul Catcher Ghost Nether Ghosts and a few low-level Witch Ghosts that were injured. At this moment, in the command room, there was complete silence. Everyone looked at what was happening outside the window with their mouths wide open. They couldn't believe it even if they saw it with their own eyes. As members of the cultivation army, how could they not know what kind of equipment the military had? The power just now was something that even the Tomahawk Spirit light cannons that the military had first developed couldn't achieve. Qin Zhan stared blankly at the screaming ghost army in the void. He turned to Tang Guangbei and asked, "Elder Tang, what level talisman did you use?" Tang Guangbei's face revealed a smug expression. Those talismans that exploded in the air also had a part to play in his effort. Level 12. The entire command room was filled with the sound of gasps. Everyone looked incredulous as if saying, "How is this possible?" The difficulty of making level 12 talismans increased exponentially. Although they could still be mass-produced, it required a large number of spirit sequencers to work together. This was only one of the basic requirements. The other was the problem of materials. The materials for level 12 talismans were considered strategic military resources in the Federation. It was impossible to make so many level 12 talismans at once unless the upper echelons of the Federation gave the order to mass-produce them. With Tang Guangbei and the Tang family's strength, it was impossible to accomplish. Qin Zhan's mind worked quickly, and he looked at Tang Guangbei with a trace of doubt. Tang Guangbei had been researching talismans for many years, and his mental state had already reached a transcendent state. He was always calm in the face of trouble. Plus, he was old, so his emotional fluctuations were very small. But at this moment, Tang Guangbei was overwhelmed with emotions and felt a sense of accomplishment. He looked down at everyone in the command room. He gave them a strong response to their previous contempt. Tang Guangbei glanced at them casually, as if to say, "Now you know how scary a spirit sequencer is." "Elder Tang, are you sure they are level 12 talismans?" Victorious Army asked doubtfully. "General Chang, although I can't be compared to spiritual talisman sage, I am still a special grade spirit sequencer. Is there a need for me to brag?" Tang Guangbei said unhappily. Other than Qin Zhan and the victorious troops, no one else knew who Tang Guangbei was. Only after hearing what he said did they realize that this seemingly unknown old man was actually a special grade spirit sequencer. The three most respected professions in the Federation were blacksmiths, apothecaries, and spirit sequencers. With the development of cultivation technology and the discovery and utilization of new resources, the role of spirit sequencers became more and more widespread and important. In fact, talisman creation was just one of the jobs of spirit sequencers. The use of spirit sequencers had already penetrated into every part of people's lives. In the military, there were other uses besides talismans. The research and development of artificial intelligence, various kinds of low-level artifact automation, unmanned flying shuttles, intelligent wristwatches, intelligent steel puppets, and so on. In short, there were many uses. Spirit sequencers were already one of the most important professions in the Federation. Now, the demand for talents was far from meeting the demand. A level 3 spirit sequencer had an extraordinary status in society, not to mention a special grade spirit sequencer like Elder Tang. The number of special grade spirit sequencers in the Federation was extremely limited. It was already good enough to have one or two on a cultivation planet that was level 3 and above. "Elder Tang, How many level 12 talismans did your men bring? Qin Zhan's eyes flashed as he asked urgently. Unlike the ever-victorious army, Qin Zhan's first reaction was to ask about the number. Level 12 talismans were absolutely destructive to the ghost army. If they focused their firepower, they could even destroy the witch ghost. 120,000 talismans. When Tang Guangbei said the number, his back was incomparably straight. He felt like he was dozens of years younger. He hadn't shown off for a long time. Now that he had, Tang Guangbei felt an indescribable pleasure. All 329,868 hairs on his body felt happy. Thump! Li Hu sat down on the ground. Transparent liquid kept flowing out of his nose. He was shocked. 120,000 level 12 talismans? What kind of concept was that? Even the two divine generals, Chu Tianqi and Kong Lanxin, were shocked. They looked at Tang Guangbei with their mouths agape, speechless. Qin Zhan's eyes shone with enthusiasm. Elder Tang, did your Tang family solve the problem of mass production of level 12 talismans? Tang Guangbei's expression suddenly darkened, but it disappeared quickly. A bitter smile appeared on his face. It would be great if the Tang family could solve this problem. Unfortunately, it wasn't. That guy was simply amazing. It was just that he was unlucky to meet Wu Ho. Tang Guangbei felt sorry, but he didn't show it on his face. Minister Qin, I don't have time to go into detail now. This old man has organized a total of 8,000 cultivators. The others are not included. You should quickly send people to organize them. Although there are 120,000 level 12 talismans, we still need the cultivators to go out and fight. You are an expert in arranging troops. With 60,000 people under your command, even if they are a bunch of rogue cultivators with your level, you should be able to display a lot of battle strength. Tang Guangbei changed the topic. Qin Zhan's heart, which had sunk into despair, was rekindled. Although it was a pity that Li Daochong died, it would also be exciting if the Tang family developed the technology of mass production of level 12 talismans. To some extent, it was even more important than Li Daochong. This technology was enough to allow the Federation to launch a counterattack against the Rakshasa state. Qin Zhan looked at Tang Guangbei and nodded. His eyes were filled with respect. Elder Tang, after this battle, your Tang family will definitely become the number one family in the Federation. Tang Guangbei's heart was bitter. He didn't say anything and sent out another signal talisman. 3,000 level 12 talismans whizzed out again. This time, when everyone in the command room saw the beams of talisman light again, their eyes lit up. The dark clouds in their hearts were dispelled and the sun was revealed. There was a turning point in the situation of certain death. Dozens of kilometers away, on the mountain peak, Li Daochong was lying in the middle of a huge pit. His hand was hanging by his side. He couldn't crush the black Grand Wizard pill in his palm. Li Daochong's body was falling apart. He couldn't muster any strength. Time passed by minute. When he heard a loud noise coming from afar, Li Daochong's lips slightly raised. The continuous loud noise was like a string of pleasant syllables. Every sound was a salute prepared by Li Daochong for the ghost army. However, in just a few seconds, Li Daochong's smile froze. His expression became urgent. Although he couldn't move and had no spiritual energy in his body, Li Daochong's telekinetic perception was still there. He had been locking on to the cherry blossom gauze. Just now, the cherry blossom gauze moved. It was moving in the direction of Li Daochong. Its speed wasn't very fast, but it could cover the distance of dozens of kilometers in just a few minutes. Motherf *****. Li Daochong cursed in his heart. If he couldn't crush the Grand Wizard pill, he would really die when the cherry blossom gauze came. Li Daochong desperately clenched the Grand Wizard pill in his hand. However, he couldn't crush it with his little strength. The smell of the cherry blossom gauze was getting closer. Li Daochong gritted his teeth and struggled to turn over. This simple action was extremely difficult for him to complete. Li Daochong raised his hand and smashed the Grand Wizard pill on the ground. Thud, thud again and again. This degree of impact was even worse than that of a child. How could the Grand Wizard pill, which was as hard as iron, be smashed? Squeak, squeak, squeak. Just as Li Daochong revealed a bitter smile, he heard the soft cry of a little monkey. Li Daochong looked up. In the midst of the dust, a burly figure walked out. It was as tall as a person. It was the Shabai, the little monkey. Li Daochong looked at the Shabai in surprise. He smiled weakly. Little thing, you grow really fast. Hurry up and leave. Don't worry about me. I can't raise you anymore. There are a lot of ghosts on this 13 Specter. If you can eat them all, you will probably evolve to become extremely powerful. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It was unknown if the Shabai understood Li Daochong's words. It continued to make soft cries. When it walked in front of Li Daochong, the Shabai suddenly opened its mouth. Li Daochong was slightly stunned. There was a trace of vigilance and nervousness in his eyes. The Shabai's action was really scary. It was as if it wanted to eat him. However, Li Daochong soon smiled. His smile was very bright. The Shabai spat out a few wisps of unconscious souls. They were all high-level green ghosts. Their bodies were ethereal and could collapse at any time. The Shabai pointed at the souls and then pointed at Li Daochong's mouth. It made a eating gesture and finally raised its arms to show its biceps. You mean, I will have strength after eating these souls? Li Daochong smiled weakly. The Shabai nodded desperately. Ha ha ha, little thing, I was right to save you. Li Daochong seemed to have forgotten the soreness in his body and laughed. Li Daochong's telekinesis was also very weak at the moment. However, killing a few weak green ghosts was still possible. The Shabai fed on ghosts. The naive little monkey thought that Li Daochong could also replenish his energy by eating ghosts. If it was someone else, it would naturally not be possible. However, for Li Daochong, the Shabai little monkey had accidentally helped him a lot. Li Daochong moved his telekinesis, and the 7 souls spat out by the Shabai little monkey were instantly killed. A prompt immediately sounded from the depths of his sea of consciousness. The green ghost-level dark ghosts were not of much use to Li Daochong now. However, he could still convert some of his spirit power into spirit power. In less than a second, Li Daochong's empty spirit power was replenished. Although it was not much, it was more than enough to support him crushing the Grand Wizard pill. At the same time, the Shabai little monkey saw Li Daochong stand up and happily danced. Its body slowly shrank and returned to its original small size. The Shabai little monkey had just climbed onto Li Daochong's shoulder when it suddenly became anxious and let out a hurried alarm. The cherry blossom gauze was here. Li Daochong squeezed his hand. Pa, a Pang Ye's Grand Wizard pill turned into powder. A thick dark green mist was instantly sucked into Li Daochong's body. D. Killed a high-level Grand Wizard ghost. Obtained spirit power, converted into spirit power. A huge amount of spirit power was born in Li Daochong's body like a tide. Hiss, Li Daochong closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened his eyes again, his dark eyes regained their light and a blue-gold electric light flashed inside. The amount of spirit power converted from killing the high-level Grand Wizard ghost was more than Li Daochong had expected. At this moment, Chapter 492. Li Daochong lowered his head and looked at his hands that had regained their freedom. The feeling of powerlessness just now made him feel very uneasy. The feeling of being filled with power was the most reliable. Li Daochong used his telekinesis and sent a voice transmission into the Shabi monkey's mind. The anxious Shabi monkey immediately calmed down. A pair of cute big eyes stared at Li Daochong for a while, its gaze filled with reluctance. Go. If I'm not dead, I'll look for you. If anything happens to me, 13 Specter should be a paradise for you, Li Daochong said as he reached out and took the Shabi off his shoulder and threw it on the ground. Squeak! The shabby monkey jumped up and let out 2 soft squeaks. Tears flashed in its eyes, and it actually wiped its eyes with its small hand. Go quickly. I can't protect you, Li Daochong said anxiously. The shabby monkey's body trembled involuntarily. Its innate perception of dark ghosts increased the pressure it felt by several times. After all, the shabby had not grown up yet. Facing an existence like Wu Ho, it could not resist. Slip away. The shabby monkey disappeared into the dust. Seeing the shabby escape, Li Daochong smiled with relief. Little guy, I believe you can survive. The smile on Li Daochong's face only lasted for a second or two before it disappeared. He turned to look in the other direction. Li Daochong quietly disappeared into the dust. His aura was not revealed from beginning to end. Even when he recovered his spirit energy, he completely restrained it. Moreover, a high-level Grand Wizard Ghost's soul energy was extremely powerful. Li Daochong was in a completely depleted state. After the hot-blooded upgrader converted the high-level Grand Wizard Ghost's soul energy, not only did Li Daochong recover, but the Sun Jin Dan in his body also grew a little. He was not far from breaking through to the nascent soul stage. He only needed an opportunity to kill another Grand Wizard Ghost, and Li Daochong could level up again and enter the Yuanying realm. Of course, Li Daochong was not in a hurry to level up. Once he stepped into the Yuanying realm, he would encounter another lightning tribulation. Li Daochong's memory of Jin Dan's lightning tribulation was still fresh in his mind. That time, it was thanks to the help of a large number of wandering ghosts that he was able to successfully overcome it. Yuanying's thunder tribulation was naturally more powerful. Li Daochong was not prepared at all, so it was very unwise to rush through the thunder tribulation. Li Daochong disappeared for a few seconds. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed over. Li Daochong, who was hiding in the dust, blinked. If the black shadow had not appeared, he would not have noticed it. Li Daochong frowned slightly. His telekinesis was strong enough, but there were still things that he couldn't capture. At this moment, the black shadow was only about 30 meters away from Li Daochong. Because the dust was extremely thick, the naked eye could not see more than 5 meters away. It was impossible to see anything more than 30 meters away. Li Daochong's eyes flashed with a blue-gold brilliance, and his vision suddenly changed. More than 30 meters away, a man in a black robe who was less than 1.6 meters tall was looking in a certain direction with a cold expression. A person? Li Daochong felt a little strange. The black-robed man's aura was not death aura, nor was it ghost aura. It was another kind of aura. It was a dark aura that was 10 times more violent than death aura. Li Daochong's heart skipped a beat. It was demonic aura. The cherry blossom gauze's aura was still moving towards him at a constant speed. Soon, within the range of Li Daochong's vision, the cherry blossom gauze was looking for Li Daochong's traces in the dust. Li Daochong crouched down and completely concealed his aura. At this moment, the black-robed man suddenly moved. He flew out like a ghost. Bang, 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 several muffled sounds came from the dust. Li Daochong's eyes flashed with a blue-gold brilliance. Dozens of meters away, the cherry blossom gauze's beautiful eyes were filled with horror. The black-robed man also landed. Li Daochong frowned. Why were the two of them fighting? Li Daochong was still worried that he would be surrounded. The black-robed man's aura was not weaker than the cherry blossom gauze's. Respected Rakshasa states Wu Ho, come back with me. The black-robed man's mouth did not move, but an extremely unpleasant and hoarse voice came out. What if I don't? The cherry blossom gauze said coldly. Empress Wu Ho, you are about to welcome a big day. Why don't you come back? It is your fortune to be chosen by the netherworld race. If you marry the prince of our race, you will be able to do whatever you want in the Hades in the future. Your cultivation will also improve by leaps and bounds. The black-robed man's hoarse voice was not loud, but it made one's mind buzz and unease. Big day? What big day? The cherry blossom gauz's expression was cold. He, Empress Wu Ho, why are you playing dumb? The Rakshasa state has already reached a marriage agreement with the Netherworld race. Your ruler has already agreed to the marriage between you and the prince of our race. The black-robed man laughed sinisterly. Humph, ruler? I am the ruler of the Rakshasa state. Go back and tell your prince that there is no such thing. You can go back. As the cherry blossom gauze spoke, a ghostly aura emanated from her body, and the surrounding dust was pushed away by an invisible force. Empress Wu Ho, this matter is not up to you. The black-robed man's tone turned cold. Not up to me? Then we can try. The cherry blossom gauze slowly raised the Hades King's sword behind her back. The black-robed man narrowed his eyes, and a black light shot out from his hand. The cherry blossom gauze felt a chill behind her back, and she turned around and pushed her palm out. Bang! A burly man suddenly appeared behind the cherry blossom gauze and tried to grab the cherry blossom gauze with his huge hand. The two palms collided. The cherry blossom gauze did not move from her spot, and the burly man took 3 steps back. The burly man gasped and looked at the petite and beautiful cherry blossom gauze in surprise. The burly man did not expect the cherry blossom gauze to be stronger than him. The cherry blossom gauze pushed her palm out, and then controlled the Hades King's sword to fly to the side. Clang! An ear-piercing sound rang out. The Hades King's sword collided with a black iron chain. The black iron chain was shaken off, and a black shadow fell down and retrieved the black iron chain and coiled it around her body. Another gloomy woman with totem tattoos on her face appeared, and the black iron chain coiled around her body like a black python, forming a chain armor. The black-robed man was not surprised that the cherry blossom gauze had successfully blocked the attack from both sides. The Rakshasa state's Wu Ho was not worthy of being the Prince of Hell's betrothed wife if she could not do this. The black-robed man smiled sinisterly, as if he could already see the cherry blossom gauze being caught. At this time, Li Daochong, who was hiding in the dark, saw this scene and the conversation just now. He could roughly guess the reason for the infighting between the Hades. Marriage alliance? Li Daochong rubbed his chin, and a sly look appeared on his face. It seemed that the Rakshasa state was not having a good time, or else why would they have a marriage alliance? Since they had an internal conflict, there was no need for him to interfere. Let them fight among themselves. After thinking about it, Li Daochong smiled sinisterly, and then quietly retreated. Li Daochong did not dare to move too quickly. The 3 newcomers were each more powerful than the other, and they were not inferior to the cherry blossom gauze at all. He had to be careful in front of these terrifying people. Li Daochong retreated step by step. Just as he retreated dozens of meters, his body suddenly trembled. He saw 2 auras hundreds of meters away, and he could not be more familiar with one of them. The black-robed man looked at the cherry blossom gauze with a sinister smile on his face, as if he was looking at a canary in a cage. However, after a few seconds there was no movement. The black-robed man frowned, and the chain-armored woman and the giant man also had a strange look on their faces. The chain-armored woman and the giant man's sneak attack was originally to distract the cherry blossom gauze, and the real capture of the cherry blossom gauze was someone else. However, that person did not appear as expected, and the best time was fleeting. "Demon Blade, what are you waiting for?" the giant man said in a rough voice. The black-robed man was a little annoyed. He should have taken down the cherry blossom gauze in one fell swoop and left directly. Demon Blade did not act according to the original plan. His aura was clearly nearby, but he did not make a move. What the hell? The black-robed man's face darkened, and he was a little displeased. If not for the fact that Demon Blade's strength was above his, he would have definitely pulled this guy out and punished him. "Demon Blade, are you done fooling around? Come out quickly." The black-robed man suppressed the anger in his heart and asked. "Ha ha ha, sorry. I bumped into a wild game on the way here." The smell was too fragrant, and I couldn't help but make a move. I didn't expect the wild game to have a few powerful talismans on it, which delayed me a little. Just as the black-robed man finished speaking, a playful voice came from the dust cloud in the distance. Not long after, a young man with a giant saber on his shoulder walked out of the dust cloud. He was also carrying something in his hand. To be precise, it was a person. Li Daochong, who had already retreated far away, shot a cold light in his dark eyes. The person carrying the giant saber was actually Yu Yen. F***ck. Li Daochong cursed in his heart. Chapter 493. After Yu Yen flew out of the stronghold building, she hurriedly flew dozens of kilometers to the area where Li Daochong had fallen. Not long after she entered the smoke and dust, she bumped into Demon Blade Hades, who had come to capture Cherry Blossom Gauze. As soon as the two of them met, they immediately started fighting. Yu Yen was only at the early stage of Jindan, so how could she be Demon Blade's opponent? If she didn't have a few level 12 talismans and a level 13 talisman that Li Daochong had specially made for her, she wouldn't have been able to fight him. Yu Yen didn't even have the chance to fight back. However, even with these talismans, Yu Yen was only able to resist for a short while before she was captured. It was also a coincidence that Demon Blade had found Yu Yen. The moment he saw Yu Yen, the Demon Flame Azura saber in Demon Blade's hand began to tremble violently. Demon Blade carefully probed and discovered that this human female cultivator was born with a heavenly Yin soul. This soul could be refined into a powerful demon spirit weapon soul. Although Demon Blade had a mission, he was immediately tempted after seeing Yu Yen. He would rather miss the opportunity to capture Wu Ho and capture Yu Yen first. When the chain-armored woman and the giant man saw Demon Blade appear with a human female cultivator, they looked at each other and felt that Demon Blade was a little arrogant. He didn't do his job and actually went to capture a human cultivator. If the prince knew about this, he would be lucky if he didn't get fried. The black-robed man's expression was gloomy as he glared at Demon Blade angrily. Demon Blade smiled at the black-robed man and said, "Fei Lian, you won't tell on me behind my back because of such a small matter, right?" The black-robed man was Fei Lian, the deputy director of the Reward and Punishment Department of the Netherworld clan. He wasn't as strong as Demon Blade, but his authority was far above Demon Blade. Fei Lian replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "Demon Blade, if this mission is completed successfully, I won't say anything. If not, I will report the situation to His Royal Highness." Demon Blade shrugged after hearing that and showed an indifferent expression. "Fei Lian, you're still so inflexible. Forget it. Isn't it just Wu Ho from the Rakshasa state? She's just a sorcerer ancestor. No matter how powerful she is, she's just one of the lower races among the thousands of ghost races in the Hades." Fei Lian did not argue with Demon Blade. Instead, he made an inviting gesture, as if he was saying, "Since the Magus ancestor level is nothing special, you can go ahead." Mo Dao's hand loosens, and with a bang Yu Yen is thrown to the ground. Yu Yen seemed to be imprisoned and couldn't move. Other than her eyes, which could still move, no other part of her body was under her control. Demon Blade, who had been carrying the giant sword on his shoulder, swung it forward and pointed at Cherry Blossom Gauze. "I don't care if you're from the 5th or 6th generations. Come with me now and you'll suffer less." Cherry Blossom Gauze gritted her teeth. As a Wu Ho, she had never been treated like this before. Cherry Blossom Gauze stretched out her hand and the Hades King's sword appeared in her hand. She immediately slashed with it. Demon Blade's Demon Flame sword slashed at Cherry Blossom Gauze. Clang! A crisp sound was heard. Immediately after, Cherry Blossom Gauze retreated a few steps, while Demon Blade took 3 steps back. Demon Blade's eyes were filled with surprise. He naturally knew how powerful that slash was. Cherry Blossom Gauze actually managed to block it. Demon Blade's face gradually turned cold. He spun the sword in his hand and suddenly slashed again. This time, a black flame appeared and slashed at Cherry Blossom Gauze. Netherworld Jade Soul Slash. Cherry Blossom Gauze shouted softly and slashed with the Hades King sword. The white sword radiance collided with the black flame. Instantly, a terrifying shockwave was released. With a bang, the surrounding dust was blown away in an instant, and visibility became clear again. Dozens of meters away, Li Daochong was hiding behind a large rock. Fortunately, he was prepared, otherwise he would have been exposed. The two terrifying forces collided. Apart from the shockwave, there was no earth-shattering explosion. Both of them were annihilated. Ha ha ha, Demon Blade, can you do it or not? Don't show off. Let me and Black Lotus help you. The giant laughed. The black-robed man, Fei Lian, had a slight change in expression. According to Xing Paoluo, Cherry Blossom Gauze shouldn't be difficult to deal with. However, Demon Blade, the strongest among the four of them, had been blocked twice. Cherry Blossom Gauze's strength was much higher than expected. Demonic Blade's face darkened. He put away his frivolous expression and looked at Luo Yingsha. You can even block my demonic flame execution. I underestimated you. Cherry Blossom Gauze remained calm. A ring of light appeared in his palm. With a flick of his wrist, two white lights shot out. In such a short distance, the speed was as fast as lightning. Demon Blade blocked the attack easily with his Devil Flame sword. He stomped on the ground, and the ground beneath his feet cracked. He shot out like a cannonball. Cherry Blossom Gauze's pupils constricted. His sneak attack failed, and he hurriedly blocked with the Hades King sword. The giant sword hit the Hades King sword. With a clang, Cherry Blossom Gauze retreated more than 10 steps, and the ground cracked. Demon Blade disappeared and reappeared behind Cherry Blossom Gauze. He grabbed at the back of Cherry Blossom Gauze's shoulder. His hand reached out, but he missed. His hand passed through Sakura Veil's body. A shadow? Demon Blade was stunned. Before he could react, the shadow suddenly turned around and crashed into Demon Blade. With a boom, the shadow exploded. Demon Blade was sent flying 100 meters away. Tui! Demon Blade spat. Ha ha ha, Demon Blade, you're not even a match for an ancestor sorcerer now? The giant man laughed mockingly. Fei Lian looked at a certain direction in the sky. They didn't have much time left. They only had 3 hours. If they couldn't capture Cherry Blossom Gauze, the space gate that they spent a lot of devil stones to open would close. If they wanted to return, they would have to cross mountains and rivers. It would take months for them to reach the Netherworld tribe. Attack together, Fei Lian ordered. As soon as he finished speaking, the giant man and Black Lotus immediately rushed forward. Fei Lian opened his black robe and flew out like a giant bat. Devil Blade was infuriated. He was sent flying away by a Magus ancestor-level ghost. In the Hades, the ghost was an inferior race, the witch ghost was an intermediate race, and the devil was a noble race, the true ruler of the Hades. It was just that the demonic chi of the demonic clan was too strong. Outside of the Hades, they would be punished by the laws. This was somewhat similar to the heavenly tribulation that cultivators would encounter when breaking through realms. If the Devil clan entered a space without nether transformation, they would suffer a lightning tribulation every few days or week. It was not tolerated by the heavens and earth. Demons could not leave the Hades for too long, or they would be punished by the heavens. Strictly speaking, 13 Specter could no longer be considered a part of the Spiritor realm. The aura here was mixed, and the aura of death and spirit coexisted, making it very unstable. But even in such a space, demons couldn't stay for too long. Heavenly tribulation would still descend. Fei Lian brought the giant man, Black Lotus, and Devil Blade here. They had to first suppress their powers, then spend a large amount of devil stones to activate the transportation array. The cost of capturing Cherry Blossom Gauze was actually quite high. If they failed the mission, not only would the 4 of them be punished, they would also be demoted. Fei Lian had worked hard to climb to the position of vice director of the Reward and Punishment Department. How could he be willing to resign? Cherry Blossom Gauze was already having a hard time dealing with Devil Blade. With 3 more, she would be in an extremely passive situation. 4 against 1, Cherry Blossom Gauze was forced to retreat again and again. Li Daochong, who was hiding behind a large rock, did not have the time to watch the battle. He was waiting for an opportunity to rescue Yu Yan. Cherry Blossom Gauze was surrounded by 4 demons. This was the perfect opportunity. Yu Yan was still lying motionless on the scorched ground less than 50 meters away from Li Daochong. Li Daochong did not hesitate. With a whoosh, he leaped out and used the 1,000-sound escape. He carried Yu Yan and fled in the opposite direction of the stronghold building. The 1,000-sound escape was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they were more than 10 kilometers away. However, just as Li Daochong was about to escape, 2 invisible force fields enveloped him. Li Daochong suddenly slowed down. Soon, a white figure appeared behind him. It was Cherry Blossom Gauze. The 4 devil cultivators behind her were hot on her heels. Li Daochong was blessed with 2 force fields. One was force field, while the other was devil force field. Force field came from Cherry Blossom Gauze, while devil force field came from Devil Blade. Although Li Daochong was restricted, he was still very fast. However, he could not reach 1,000 times the speed of sound. If there was only one force field, Li Daochong would not be afraid. His divine sense was not weak either. He could resist and shake it off. However, with 2 force fields at the same time, Li Daochong was a little overwhelmed. It greatly affected his speed. Li Daochong, help me deal with those 4 demons. I can promise you that I will leave 13 Specter immediately after this. I will not attack anyone. Cherry Blossom Gauze transmitted her voice through telekinesis. Li Daochong did not seem to hear her. He continued to fly as fast as he could. The moment Li Daochong used the 1,000-sound escape, he was immediately discovered by the 4 demons and Cherry Blossom Gauze. However, the 4 demons were not interested in Li Daochong at all. They only wanted to capture Cherry Blossom Gauze. However, when Cherry Blossom Gauze realized that Li Daochong was fine, her eyes revealed a look of shock. This kid took a full blow from her 10,000 nether worshipping and was completely fine? At that moment, Cherry Blossom Gauze wondered if she was hallucinating. Of course, it was only for a moment before Cherry Blossom Gauze came back to her senses. Seeing Li Daochong's terrifying speed, she immediately shot out a stream of telekinesis and used the netherworld escape technique to chase after him. When Devil Blade saw that the human cultivator who suddenly appeared was carrying his prey, he immediately sent out his demonic sense. Just like that, in a mountain range dozens of kilometers away from the northwest city of Demon Subduing City, Li Daochong carried Yu Yan and flew at a low altitude. Cherry Blossom Gauze followed closely behind, constantly sending out telekinesis sound transmissions to Li Daochong for help. Behind them, the 4 demons chased closely behind. Old Tai, set a small goal first. Remember the new 81 Chinese website. Oh. Chapter 494. Li Daochong was suppressed by 2 force fields and was unable to fly at his fastest speed. Cherry Blossom Gauze and Dog Skin Plaster chased after him. The 4 demons behind them chased after Cherry Blossom Gauze. Just like that, Li Daochong carried Yu Yan and flew for hundreds of kilometers. Li Daochong observed the surrounding terrain as he flew. This mountain range was vast and had a complicated terrain. Li Daochong saw that he couldn't shake them off, so he decided to hide. Li Daochong dove into the valley. He gave up flying and ran instead. His speed was almost the same as when he was flying. However, it was difficult to see Li Daochong with the naked eye. The mountain range was filled with dead trees. Many of them were tall and sturdy, with black leaves, black flowers, and black fruits growing on their branches. 13 Specter had lost its vitality bit by bit after hundreds of years of war between the two races. The entire planet was dying. Li Daochong carried Yu Yen and ran between the mountains. He went south, west, and then north. His direction was unpredictable. Cherry blossom gauze struggled to keep up in the air, and sometimes lost track of Li Daochong's aura. Seeing that Li Daochong could disappear at any time, Cherry Blossom Gauze decided to fly at a low altitude. The 4 demons couldn't catch up to Cherry Blossom Gauze, and Fei Lian became irritated. Demon Blade was the most irritated of the 4. A human cultivator dared to take away his prey right under his nose. Demon Blade was flying at his fastest speed, but he still couldn't close the distance. Demon Blade's eyes narrowed. The Demon Flame Azura saber flew out from his back and landed at Demon Blade's feet. Demon Blade bit his index finger and dripped a drop of demon blood on the Demon Flame saber. The Demon Flame Azura saber quickly absorbed Demon Blade's blood. Then, the saber burned with black flames. Demon Blade chanted, "Demon Soul, Fire Spirit Escape." Bang! The black flames on the Demon Flame Azura saber suddenly rose. Demon Blade stood on the saber and instantly sped up. Fei Lian, Hei Lian, and Hei Lian were shocked to see the demonic saber fly past them. Before they could recover from their shock, they were even more shocked to see the demonic saber chase after the falling cherry veil and ignore it. Instead, the demonic saber leaped over the falling cherry veil and chased after the human cultivator who was rushing towards the distant mountain peak at high speed. Fei Lian cursed. Demon Blade, what are you doing?" The demonic saber completely ignored him. Its pair of dark red eyes stared fixedly at Li Daochong's rapidly running back. It was a great humiliation for the demonic saber to have its prey snatched away. Of course, the most important thing was that female cultivator's heavenly Een soul. The demonic saber wanted it too much. Demon Blade, demon, gauze demon blade and to demon blade, to translation gauze. Demon blade. Mo Dao's strength would also increase greatly, and there was even a slight possibility that he could advance to the next level of the devil race. As for capturing Cherry Blossom Gauze, Demon Blade believed that as long as he was a little more serious, capturing him would be a piece of cake. The 4 demons who came to capture Cherry Blossom Gauze had suppressed their strength in order to avoid triggering the heavenly tribulation. However, there was a time limit to this suppression. Once the time was up, their demonic chi would break through the suppression and be completely released. Demonic chi that exceeded the laws of the spirit realm would immediately trigger the wrath of the heavens and cause yang lightning to strike. Therefore, Demon Blade's strength in the battle against Cherry Blossom Gauze was not even 1/10 of his peak state. Even so, Cherry Blossom Gauze was no match for Demon Blade. Cherry Blossom Gauze was a top-level witch ghost in the Hades. It was an ancestor witch ghost and would become a devil ghost after evolving. The 4 demons chasing after Cherry Blossom Gauze were devil ghosts. They were the noblest superiors in the Hades and were collectively known as the demon race. Demon Blade did not care about Cherry Blossom Gauze at all. He passed by the ladder and dived halfway up the mountain. Li Daochong sensed an aura rapidly approaching. He took a deep breath and increased his speed. This was Li Daochong's maximum speed. He could not go any faster under the cover of the 2 force field. Demon Blade was about to catch the human cultivator, but he did not expect the human cultivator's speed to increase as well. He could not catch up for a while. Demon Blade's expression became more and more unsightly. He could not catch up even after burning his demon blood and using the fire spirit escape. Was this human cultivator a rabbit? Li Daochong's spiritual chi was decreasing at an alarming rate. Even if his spiritual chi was as abundant as the sea, he could not withstand such consumption. While Li Daochong was running, he suddenly activated his telekinesis and returned to the abandoned military base, where Fang Yuliang and the others had rested. Li Daochong smiled slightly and ran toward the military base. Li Daochong had seen all of Fang Yuliang's actions at the time and remembered them in his mind. Li Daochong already knew how to break through the spirit array and open the stone door. Those spirit arrays might be able to hold out for a while. Li Daochong had heard from Fang Yuliang that there were 2 exits in the abandoned military base. One was the huge stone door that they had entered and exited, and the other was the emergency exit. It was said that there was a small teleportation array that could teleport people tens of thousands of kilometers away in an instant. Soon, Li Daochong carried Yu Yan to the spirit array near the military base and rushed into it without stopping. The only way to pass through the spirit array was to follow a specific path. Otherwise, the spirit array would attack and repel them. Li Daochong entered the spirit array without any obstructions. He passed through it in an instant and arrived in front of the stone door. The demonic blade didn't know that there was a trap and plunged into it. The spirit arrays that had been silent for decades were all triggered. Spirit talismans, multicolored lights, spirit light cannons, and even heaven-grade magic weapons bombarded the demonic blade that dared to invade. These offensive and defensive spirit arrays could at least destroy an entire ghost army, but they had no effect on the demonic blade. More than a dozen flying swords shot at the demonic blade and shattered instantly. The explosive power triggered by the level 9 and level 10 spirit talismans couldn't even burn the hair on the demonic blade. However, there were 2 or 3 special magic weapons that made the demonic blade feel a little uncomfortable. 3 spirit arrays were activated at the same time to attack the demonic blade, but they only slowed him down. Cherry Blossom Gauze followed closely. She saw Li Daochong's every move. Seeing that the demonic blade was blocked, Cherry Blossom Gauze also used an escape technique and shot toward Li Daochong. Creak. Accompanied by the sound of an old door that had been in disrepair for dozens of times, the giant stone door was opened under Li Daochong's unlocking operation. The giant stone door only opened a crack. From afar, it was almost impossible to tell whether the stone door was open or not. However, 4 people who were close by, this crack was enough for 5 or 6 people to pass through side by side. As soon as the stone door opened, Li Daochong carried Yu Yan and entered in a flash. He immediately pressed the button to lock the door. The stone door began to close, but the huge stone door was too cumbersome. Li Daochong listened to Fang Yuliang's explanation and learned that the stone door was made of spirit particle star stone. The entire base was covered with this kind of spirit particle star stone, and there were hundreds of spirit arrays on top of it, making it impregnable. The purpose of building this military base was for defense. Fang Yuliang said that even if 13 Specter was destroyed, this military base might not be breached. Spirit star stones were materials from spirit star. The density of spirit star was beyond imagination, and its gravity had reached an inhuman level. Yuanian cultivators could not survive on spirit star. Once they got close, they would be sucked in and compressed to the size of a pinky fingernail. The stone door could withstand the bombardment of spirit nuclear bombs. After entering, Li Daochong's heartstrings relaxed a little. However, at this moment, a white shadow suddenly accelerated outside the stone door. In a flash, it shot into the stone door. Li Daochong's gaze turned cold. The Tai Chi pattern in his palm flickered intensely, and the sword shadow in the center buzzed. Before Li Daochong could do anything, a loud sound came from outside. The devil blade broke through all the spirit arrays and burst out with an astonishing speed. With a swoosh, a black shadow followed by a white shadow shot in. With a rumble, the stone door closed completely the moment the black shadow shot in. Li Daochong carried Yu Yan, and his expression was extremely ugly. Cherry Blossom Gauze and the demon had rushed in at the last moment. Li Daochong slowly put Yu Yan down. Since he could not hide, he would fight. The spirit arrays inside the stone door had already been activated, and it was as bright as day. Li Daochong, Cherry Blossom Gauze, and the Devil Blade stood in a triangular formation. The three of them faced each other. Li Daochong, I promise you, as long as you join forces with me to deal with the demon, I will let bygones be bygones. The grudge between us will be written off, Cherry Blossom Gauze suddenly said. After hearing Cherry Blossom Gauze's words, Li Daochong was expressionless. He looked at the Devil Blade, and a trace of greed flashed in the depths of his pitch-black eyes. In the depths of Li Daochong's mind, the blood-boiling level-up device suddenly made an extremely pleasant notification sound. Discovered low-level demon. Discovered low-level demon. Please devour, please devour. Li Daochong narrowed his eyes. It was actually a demon. There were vague records of demons in various ancient books of the Shenghua Federation. When the catastrophe had struck, there had not been any terrifying existences at the level of demons in the Shenghua Federation, which ancestor Wu Ho was already at the highest level. The three cultivation empires were the main battlefield at that time, and that was where the Hades mainly attacked. The Hades demons were all targeting there. At that time, the Shenghua Federation was only a small part of the battlefield. The various ancient books had different names for demons. Some called them demons, some called them demons, and some called them demons. In fact, it was more accurate to call them demons. These Hades races, which looked similar to the thousands of races in the spirit realm, were actually intelligent evil creatures bred in the abyss of the Hades. They were powerful, greedy, and ambitious. They called themselves the gods of the Hades. To a certain extent, it was not wrong. Demons were many times more powerful than witch ancestor Wu Ho. They were existences that could kill soul formation cultivators in an instant. Li Daochong was no match for Cherry Blossom Gauze. Naturally, he would not be able to defeat the demons. However, Li Daochong's strength had increased after crushing the Grand Wizard Pill. Cherry Blossom Gauze was also an enemy of the demons. The enemy of an enemy was a friend. Therefore, Li Daochong wanted to join hands with Cherry Blossom Gauze. However, Li Daochong did not believe in Cherry Blossom Gauze's promise. Therefore, the best outcome would be for Cherry Blossom Gauze to be injured and Li Daochong to kill the demons. In this enclosed space, Li Daochong had to consider everything. He would not foolishly help Cherry Blossom Gauze kill the demons just because the situation forced him to. Once the demons were killed, Cherry Blossom Gauze might turn on him. Li Daochong, what are you thinking about? Do you know what kind of existence is standing in front of you? Cherry Blossom Gauze was anxious when Li Daochong did not speak. Old Tai set a small goal first. Remember new 8th Chinese network. Chapter 495. Boom. As soon as Cherry Blossom Gauze finished speaking, the stone door shook violently. The three demons outside were attacking the stone door. The stone door made of star spirit stone trembled slightly. Li Daochong's expression changed slightly. The nether demon's strength was not to be underestimated. The star spirit stone might not be able to hold on indefinitely. Cherry Blossom Gauze, are you scared out of your wits? You want this ant to help you? Will it work? Ha! Demonic Blade laughed and looked at Li Daochong with disdain. However, as soon as Demonic Blade laughed, a ray of light shot over. Li Daochong had already spoken. At the same time, he sent a message to Cherry Blossom Gauze, do it. Cherry Blossom Gauze, who was anxious, relaxed slightly when she heard this. Her beautiful face revealed a trace of joy. If Li Daochong joined forces with her, the probability of killing Demonic Blade would be greatly increased. Boom! Demonic Blade was hit by the blade radiance and was sent flying. He crashed into the wall made of star spirit stone. Fiend Saber had been disdainful of Li Daochong, but before he could finish mocking him, he was sent flying by the ant in his eyes. He was slapped in the face. Demonic Blade's eyes flashed with anger. The demonic flame Azura saber left his hand and flew toward Li Daochong. Cherry Blossom Gauze was already prepared. She attacked with her King Ghost sword at the same time and clashed with the demonic flame saber. Li Daochong reacted quickly. Song Ink shot out like a ray of light. Demonic Blade waved his hand to block. With a clang, he blocked Song Ink. Then, he leaped and grabbed Li Daochong's head. Li Daochong's lips curled up slightly. He did not plan to fight for a long time from the beginning, not to mention how long the stone door could hold on. Whether or not he and Luo Yingsha would be able to kill this demon was still a question mark. He had to seize this opportunity when the Devil Cultivator looked down on him. If he missed it, it would be even more difficult when the Devil Cultivator became serious. "Be careful," Cherry Blossom Gauze said anxiously when she realized that she couldn't help Li Daochong in time. Lightning flashed in Li Daochong's eyes as he abruptly raised his head. Heavenly Thunder Art, Eye of Thunder Punishment, 2 Spirit Sun lightning bolts blasted out. Almost at the same time, the 2 sword shadows in Li Daochong's Taiji pattern completely materialized. The Great Void Swordsmanship, a sword in the sky, and life and death were on the line. 2 streaks of sword light broke through the air. Cherry Blossom Gauze, who was not far away, was shocked. She had just experienced the power of these 2 sword auras, and now it seemed that they were even more powerful than when they were used against her. "What's wrong with this kid?" Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes were filled with bewilderment, but the surprise only lasted for a moment. He immediately realized that this was an opportunity to kill or severely injure Demonic Blade. Cherry Blossom Gauze quickly chanted. The moment Li Daochong raised his head, Demonic Blade felt that something was wrong. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. Demonic Blade couldn't dodge the lightning bolt. Crack! The 2 streaks of lightning struck Demonic Blade. Li Daochong released all the thunder power in his body without holding back. Demonic Blade let out a strange cry the moment he was struck by the lightning. He felt a stinging pain all over his body, and his skin was charred by the thunder power. The devil chi in his body was also disturbed by the thunder power. Demonic Blade reacted instantly, trying to circulate the devil chi to expel the thunder power, but the 2 streaks of sword light had already swept over. "You!" Demonic Blade glared at Li Daochong with his eyes wide open and burning with anger. He was so angry that he couldn't speak. Whoosh! Demonic Blade's hands were instantly covered with a layer of black scales. In a hurry, he could only block with his hand. Just as he touched the 2 streaks of sword light, another burst of thunder power entered Demonic Blade's body. The sword light also had the power of Yang Thunder. "Damn it!" Demonic Blade cursed. He watched as his hands were pierced by the sword light and cut into his flesh. Demonic Blade grunted. All the devil chi in his body gathered on his arms to block the sword light. Myriad underworld wheel destruction. Cherry Blossom Gauze's voice came from the side. Demonic Blade looked sideways and gasped. In an instant, his pride as a superior of the Hades completely disappeared. It was replaced by a look of horror. Countless white shadows appeared on Cherry Blossom Gauze's hands. They intertwined and turned into an abyss dark dragon of the Hades. It roared and charged at him. This was Cherry Blossom Gauze's most powerful skill. The moment she released the dark dragon, Wu Ho also looked exhausted. Her breathing became rapid. Boom! The dark dragon crashed into Demonic Blade and quickly entered his body. The power of Yang Thunder, Great Void Sword Chi, and the Dark Dragon attacked from 3 sides. Demonic Blade, whose strength was suppressed, could not block it. His tough demonic body seemed to be torn apart. Hideous wounds appeared on his body. Black blood flowed out. Demonic Blade's hands were cut in half by the Great Void Sword Chi. Demonic Blade crashed heavily into the wall. The shockingly dense star stone wall could not withstand such a huge impact. It caved in deeply, forming a circular depression. Cherry Blossom Gauze's eyes flashed with joy. Even if demonic blade did not die, he would lose half of his life. It would be much easier to deal with him. Li Daocheng's eyes did not waver. Instead, he felt a little strange. This demon was so heavily injured, but his aura did not weaken much. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air came from behind Cherry Blossom Gauze. The demonic flame Azura saber flew over, and Sakura Shaw dodged with all her might. However, the demonic flame still brushed past her back, causing her to cry out in pain. She was sent flying and crashed into a stone wall before crashing into the ground. It hurts. Demonic blade was embedded in the stone wall. His face was hideous. Black blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He said with praise. Cherry Blossom Gauze struggled to get up from the ground. There was a deep wound on her back. Blood flowed out. Her blood was no different from that of a human. This wound ran diagonally from her shoulder to her hip. Her spine was clearly visible. Demonic chi stirred and wriggled around the wound. Luo Yingsha's originally pale face turned ashen, like the face of a dead person. Her breasts heaved up and down violently. However, Cherry Blossom Gauze was severely injured. Under the interference of the demonic chi, she could not recover. With a bang, demonic blade broke free from the stone wall and landed on the ground. He stretched out his hand and the demonic flame Azura blade flew into his hand. You two bastards! How dare you turn my noble demonic body into this? Damn the laws of the spirit realm! If it wasn't for the suppression of so much power, you wouldn't even be able to tickle me. Demonic blade ignored the wounds on his body. He looked coldly at Cherry Blossom Gauze and Li Daocheng. Unfortunately, there are no ifs, Li Daocheng said indifferently. Demonic blade's eyes narrowed. He attacked with the demonic flame Azura blade and slashed at Li Daocheng. Clang! Li Daocheng did not move. The green light shot over. Song Ink and the demonic flame Azura blade collided. They were evenly matched. Demonic blade was stunned. Li Daocheng smiled indifferently. Looks like you're seriously injured. Cherry Blossom Gauze endured the pain. The panic that had just appeared disappeared when he saw Li Daocheng controlling the flying dagger to fight demonic blade's demonic flame Azura blade to a draw. The Hades King's sword also shot out from the other end in an instant. Clang, clang, clang. Under the control of their respective masters, the three weapons fought fiercely in the void, erupting with ear-piercing clashing sounds. The four auras in demonic blade's body were mixed together. They were Yang Thunder, Great Void Sword Chi, Nether Chi, and Demonic Chi. Even his demonic body could not withstand the three of them alone. Demonic blade looked up. There was no sky in the sealed space, but the sky outside was still looking here. Demonic blade wanted to remove the shackles that bound his power, but he did not dare to. Even though he was on the verge of death, he was still hesitant. This was because once the shackles of the seal were removed, the laws of spirit chi would be triggered and the heavenly thunder would descend from the 9 heavens. The thunder power was hundreds or thousands of times stronger than the thunder power released by the human cultivator just now. Demonic blade had experienced the great battle 1,000 years ago. He had seen with his own eyes a few nether demons that were stronger than him being killed by the 9 heavens' primordial thunder. The power of laws was too strong and intimidating. Just as demonic blade was hesitating, Li Daocheng and Cherry Blossom Gauze looked at each other and moved at the same time. One from the left and one from the right, attacking from both sides. Demonic blade did not have time to think and had to fight the human cultivator and the shaman. The hand-to-hand combat was even more tragic. Every punch hit the flesh and every palm hit the bone. Bang, crack, dong dong, all kinds of striking sounds kept coming from the stone room. The exhaustion of their physical strength kept increasing. The three of them were panting, but they still gritted their teeth and fought with all their might. Demonic blade's eyes were bloodshot. He was furious. Facing the pincer attack of the human cultivator and Wu Ho, he was somewhat unable to withstand it. He was constantly hit by the violent fists and soft palms. Puff! Demonic Blade could no longer control the mouthful of blood in his throat and spat it out. Li Daochong punched out a few times with a cracking effect, but when he hit the Devil Cultivator's body, other than some superficial injuries, the cracking effect was completely removed, and the spirit qi could not enter the Devil Cultivator's body. However, Li Daochong was not in a hurry. There was an imperceptible throbbing in his dark eyes. Li Daochong was waiting. He was waiting for the moment when the demon could no longer hold on and the seal in his body was removed. After Li Daochong released the Eye of Thunder punishment, he used the thunder power to plant a psychokinesis seed in the demon's body. Li Daochong only wanted to leave a backup plan as a means of attack. However, he accidentally found a seal in the demon's body. That seal firmly suppressed the demon's true power and did not release any of it. Li Daochong detected the shackle and immediately understood that it was set up by the demon of Hades to avoid the power of laws. Otherwise, he would be bombarded by the 9 heavens' primordial thunder. Li Daochong had a bold idea at this time. He wanted to use this demon to resist the thunder tribulation for him to break through the Yuanying realm. Li Daochong's cultivation had long been at the peak of Jin Dan. He only needed to kill one more grand wizard to succeed. When he injured the demon, the hot-blooded level-up device in the depths of Li Daochong's sea of consciousness actually issued a notification that he had obtained soul power. The demon's blood could also be absorbed. In hand-to-hand combat, as long as Li Daochong touched the demon's blood, it would be immediately absorbed and transformed. In fact, the 3 of them were panting like cows. Demonic Blade and Cherry Blossom Gauze were real, while Li Daochong was faking it. Li Daochong's physical strength was recovering bit by bit, and he was constantly absorbing the demon energy on Demonic Blade. It was just that the demon energy could not be directly absorbed by Li Daochong. He had to touch the demon's blood. A drop of demon blood transformed into spiritual energy equivalent to killing a malicious spirit. It was because of this that Li Daochong had the idea of using the demon to resist the thunder tribulation. Of course, there was also the Cherry Blossom Gauze. As long as the demon could not help but release the shackles of the seal, Li Daochong would immediately level up and step into the Yuanying realm. At that time, the 9 heavens' primordial thunder and the thunder tribulation would strike at the same time. Under the index of the 9 heavens' primordial thunder, the thunder tribulation would also strike the demon. Li Daochong was almost 100% confident in this move of diverting the disaster, because the power of law would definitely eliminate the most threatening one. Li Daochong's strength would undergo a qualitative change after he leveled up to the Yuanying realm, but compared to the demon, there was still a big gap. At best, his strength was comparable to the current Cherry Blossom Gauze, and there was still a gap between him and the Cherry Blossom Gauze in its peak state. Genius memorized this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 496. As Li Daochong's spirit qi continued to recover, his physical strength was also increasing. His thunder power was also rapidly recovering. The scales of the battle began to tilt towards Li Daochong and Cherry Blossom Gauze. To be precise, the scales of the battle were already in the hands of Li Daochong. Li Daochong's every attack became more and more tricky, and his fists contained thunder power. The wounds on Mo Dao's body were getting bigger and bigger, unable to heal. No matter how he mobilized his devil qi, it was useless. Cherry Blossom Gauze's attacks also became fiercer and fiercer. The ghost bone dagger in her hand cut open Mo Dao's flesh again and again. Zing! A white light flashed past, and 2 of Mo Dao's fingers were cut off. Damn it! Mo Dao let out a low growl. He could no longer hold on, and his demonic eyes were fixed on Li Daochong. Only then did Mo Dao realize that he had seriously underestimated this human cultivator's strength. However, He could not understand how a human cultivator at the Gene Dan stage could be so powerful. In his eyes, human cultivators at the Gene Dan stage were no different from ants that could be killed with a flick of his finger. Even a cultivator like Yuanying was just a dish in Mo Dao's eyes. However, this ridiculously young Gene Dan cultivator's combat strength was beyond imagination, completely subverting Mo Dao's common sense. It turned out that a Gene Dan cultivator could be so powerful. Mo Dao's expression became more and more ferocious. When Cherry Blossom Gauze hit him again, Mo Dao let out a roar and punched out, hitting Cherry Blossom Gauze right in the shoulder. The demon and the shaman both took a few steps back. Cherry Blossom Gauze spat out a mouthful of blood. Mo Dao was not much better off. His flesh was lacerated, and there was almost no part of his body that was intact. Not only that, but Cherry Blossom Gauze's ghost bone dagger's wound kept expanding, and the cold yin qi invaded his body. Even though Mo Dao had a demonic body, he could not take it anymore. The devil qi in his body was flowing out at an alarming speed. Li Daochong was no longer in a hurry. He looked at Mo Dao with a mocking gaze and suddenly said, "Ghost Bone Dagger is only SOSO. Ha!" Demonic Saber raised his head and laughed. Suddenly, his laughter stopped. He lowered his head and looked at Li Daochong sinisterly. "Human cultivator, the most powerful thing about you humans has always been that mouth of yours. You've successfully angered me. In order to express my respect for you, I'll let you see what a true nether demon is." Li Daochong curled his lips and said sympathetically, "Unfortunately, you won't have the chance." As he spoke, Li Daochong took out a talisman. This was the last one he had in stock. Whoosh! A light flashed. Bang! The talisman struck the demonic blade. A level 12 talisman was supposed to explode with astonishing destructive and explosive power, but after this talisman struck the demonic saber, it only emitted sparks the size of firecrackers before disappearing. The wounds on the demonic blade healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Cherry Blossom Gauze's beautiful eyes widened as she clutched her chest. Her body trembled slightly as she exclaimed, "Li Daochong, let's retreat first." After saying that, Cherry Blossom Gauze transformed into a white beam and flew into the depths of the passageway. Li Daochong looked at Cherry Blossom Gauze's disappearing figure with a hint of regret. It was a pity that the woman had escaped. He had wanted to bring her along to transcend the tribulation. Demonic Saber did not care about Cherry Blossom Gauze's escape. He only sneered as he looked in the direction that Cherry Blossom Gauze had disappeared. "Human cultivator, even Cherry Blossom Gauze has escaped. Aren't you going to escape as well?" Demonic Saber asked mockingly. "There's no need to deal with you," replied Li Daochong indifferently. "Ha ha ha, there's no need to deal with me. Human cultivator, you really don't know anything. It seems that you humans haven't done enough to popularize your knowledge. Do you really think that you and Cherry Blossom Gauze can defeat me by joining forces? Do you know the true function of those nether ghosts that you human cultivators speak of?" Demonic Saber laughed. As Demonic Saber's injuries were too severe, it would take some time to undo the shackles of the seal. If the human cultivator attacked him now, it would affect the effects of the seal's removal. Demonic Saber said so much just to buy some time. "What function?" Li Daochong deliberately pretended to be ignorant as he asked. "This isn't a secret. All the mighty figures among you human cultivators should know, so there's no harm in telling you. All the evil spirits, ghosts, anomalies, birds, and ghost beasts in the Hades only exist for one purpose, which is to transform the spirit realm into the nether. Only in a territory that has undergone nether transformation can we, the nether devils, truly descend. Otherwise, the power of the spirit realm's laws will repel us. Once the spirit realm's space senses a threat, it will immediately gather the 9 heavens' primordial thunder. That thing is no joke. Furthermore, the stronger the nether devils are, the stronger the 9 heavens' primordial thunder they produce. Therefore, the nether devils are unable to directly step into the spirit realm. They can only rely on those evil spirits to slowly nibble at it and then advance bit by bit. Without the protection of the spirit realm's laws, the nether devils can invade without restraint. Your spirit realm's universe would have been destroyed 800 years ago, Demonic Saber patiently replied. In that case, you're not the real nether devil. Li Daochong continued to play the ignorant role. Of course I am. Demonic Saber cracked a smile. Then why didn't you attract the power of laws? Is it because you're too weak? Are you one of those despicable nether devils? Li Daochong asked 3 consecutive questions in a mocking tone. The smile on Demonic Blade's face froze. Facing an ignorant young man was also a troublesome matter. Silly boy, that's because I used some means to seal my power when I came here. Otherwise, how could I have set foot in 13 Specter that hasn't been transformed into the nether realm? Even if this place isn't completely a part of the spirit realm, the spirit realm's laws still exist here. If I don't suppress my power, I'll still attract the 9 heavens' primordial lightning. Do you think you're very powerful? Ha ha ha, that's just an illusion. Demonic Saber revealed a sinister smile once again. He raised his head and sniffed as though he smelled something sweet. After talking for so long, you want to tell me that I defeated you only because you sealed your power? You're going to die anyway, so why bother with this? Li Daochong replied cooperatively. Demonic Saber's eyes were spitting fire. He was really infuriated by talking to this young man. Even now, he still hadn't reacted. Do I have to say it clearly before you can react? Idiot, Demonic Saber couldn't help but curse. Idiot. Li Daochong didn't want to be outdone and immediately retorted. At the other end of the passage, Cherry Blossom Gauze stood behind a bunker. Her beautiful eyes flickered as she looked at Li Daochong and Demonic Saber. Cherry Blossom Gauze heard their conversation. She heard Li Daochong cursing at Demonic Saber when his seal was lifted. Cherry Blossom Gauze's mind was filled with dread. This idiot still doesn't know that he's about to die. Demonic Saber sneered. You're the first human cultivator who dares to curse at me. Back when I led the Netherworld army into the human cultivator territory, there weren't many human cultivators who looked me in the eye, let alone spoke to me. Li Daochong shrugged. That's because I couldn't be bothered to look at you. Cherry Blossom Gauze, who was far away, staggered and almost lost her balance when she heard Li Daochong's reply. Boom! Demonic chi suddenly erupted from Demonic Saber's body. The entire stone room was filled with demonic chi and the space was trembling. Lowly human cultivator, you're really a rare oddity in your race. Sorry to have kept you waiting. Demonic Saber's voice became thick and solid, as if it was a gloomy groan from the abyss. Almost at the same time, the space above Demonic Saber's head trembled violently and a crack appeared. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled inside. The 9 heavens' primordial thunder was condensing. The wounds on Demonic Saber's body had completely disappeared. The demonic chi, great void sword chi, and thunder force in his body had all been expelled. Demonic Saber glanced above and then looked at Li Daochong. He said in a low voice, the 9 heavens' primordial thunder still needs some time to condense. This time is enough for you to experience the true horror. With that, Demonic Saber disappeared in a flash. Almost at the same time, Li Daochong moved as well. Thousand sound escaped. Demonic Saber grabbed nothing and looked confused. The Sun Jin Dan in Li Daochong's body was already ready. While he was talking to Demonic Saber, Li Daochong was also accumulating power. Li Daochong looked down at the demonic blood that had gathered on his palm as he moved. The demonic blood touched Li Daochong's skin. It instantly evaporated and disappeared. Beep! A familiar prompt sounded from the depths of his sea of consciousness. Absorbing the nether demon's blood. Soul power obtained. Transforming into spirit chi. Host leveled up to level 24. Buzz. The Sun Jin Dan in Li Daochong's body suddenly trembled. Immediately after, the Jin Dan split open and a cute 3-inch-tall baby jumped out. He looked exactly like Li Daochong. Li Daochong's Yuanying was hatched. The foundation establishment placenta quickly melted and merged into Li Daochong's body. 100 square meters space gradually formed in his body. The Yuanying child floated in the space. Sparks flashed in his eyes and spirit chi constantly surged out of his body. After demonic saber was unsealed, the spatial crack formed above his head suddenly became bigger. Thunderstorms raged inside like a tide. Li Daochong broke through the Yuanying realm and triggered the lightning tribulation at the same time. In the sky outside the mountain, all the spirit chi within 100-kilometer radius gathered above the military base at an astonishing speed. It kept condensing and opening a small spatial crack. It drilled into it and connected with the cracked space inside the mountain. The whole process was very fast. It was completed in a few seconds. Demonic saber chased after Li Daochong crazily during this process, but the latter was like a loach that couldn't be caught at all. Demonic saber couldn't understand how a Jin Dan cultivator could reach such a level of speed. Demonic saber wanted to continue chasing, but suddenly, a thunderstorm poured down from above like a waterfall. What's going on? Demonic saber was shocked. The demonic flame Azura saber quickly flew over to resist the sudden 9 heavens primordial thunder. Boom! Several bolts of lightning struck, and the demonic flame Azura saber was smashed into pieces. Demonic saber stared with a pair of dead fish eyes as he watched his intrinsic demonic treasure being easily smashed into pieces. Boom! Demonic saber didn't hesitate and quickly took out all the demonic treasures he carried with him. They were big and small, and he took out all the demonic treasures he could use. However, these powerful demonic treasures couldn't withstand a single blow and turned into powder before dissipating. No, how can it be so strong? 13 Specter's spirit chi is chaotic, and its nomological powers are weak. It's impossible for it to erupt with the 9 heavens primordial thunder that's stronger than the nomological powers of the real spirit realm, Demonic Saber said in despair. However, the 9 heavens primordial thunder continued to fall. Li Daochong had already hidden in the passageway. His aura was completely concealed, and not a trace of it was left behind. Li Daochong carried the still immobile Yu Yan in his arms and watched indifferently as Demonic Saber was bombarded by the 9 heavens primordial thunder one after another. Li Daochong rubbed his chin thoughtfully. This method of tribulation transcendence wasn't bad. Genius! I'll remember this site's address in a second. Mobile version of reading website. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.